Hey there everyone, welcome to Transcend Reality. My name is Andrew Chirieleison.
And my name is Samir Khan.
Do you want to learn about what makes some of the best performers in the world reach that level? Lucky for you, you're at the right place.
Here at Transcend Reality, our objective is to spark discussions centered around meaningful ideas so that you can leave feeling empowered to make progress in your life.
What matters about who Samir and I are
is that we are students of life. Transcend Reality is all about taking yesterday's reality, which we accepted,
and finding new ways to transcend yesterday's reality for a better tomorrow.
We're on a quest to find the best, world-class ideas, mindsets, and ways of life through our unique perspectives and insights.
And through conversations and interviews with shapers and framers around the world.
Our modern world is seeing such a stark divide between the people who have created massive amounts of value in our world, which has been financially successful.
From billionaires, celebrities, you get the point.
And the people who have the potential to reach that level of societal value. We want you, whoever you are and wherever you are, to gain insight into what it takes to lead a life well lived.
Because it's our belief that by creating a bridge to reach a meaningful idea or concept,
we hold the power to shape the world for a better tomorrow. Let's transcend reality as we know it, together. All right, Andrew, it's awesome getting to catch up. How are things going with you?
It's going well. I'm excited, Samir. Okay, this is the beginning of something special. I know we did our little intro clip, but this is the first episode. So
making history.
We'll see how it goes, man. You know, we're definitely going to learn as we go, that's for sure. But I'm excited. It's the first time I've ever done a podcast. So
Same here. We're seriously transcending our reality as we know it.
We are. I was just about to say, we're on the same page there.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's see, what's in store for us for episode 1 today?
Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about optimism, right?
Yeah,
I think we're going to touch on the foundations of what we're all about, what transcending reality means to us, and hopefully how we can start providing insights, you know, not only for other people, but for ourselves. I think, you know, for sure, we don't have all the answers. I don't think we're saying we do, but we're definitely trying to come to a better place of understanding and hopefully get something special out of this. I definitely know I'm going to be learning as we go throughout these conversations. And, you know, I'm sure the same for you. And hopefully somewhere in there, you know, a listener gets something out of it as well. So I'm excited.
Definitely. Same here. Yeah. So I think you touched on it perfectly, that our focus for episode 1 is all about really creating a life well lived through optimism, through optimistic nihilism, through some stories, our insights, and just humbly trying to create a better life.
Let's do it, man.
Let's get to it.
When we're talking about, you know, transcending reality, I think that, you know, in talking to you about it, you put it really nice. What does transcend reality mean for you?
For sure. So transcending reality is, well, I'll start with where I got the inspiration for the name. So all throughout my life, especially from day one with my mom and dad, they've in a way subtly taught me that it's important in life to kind of be better than you were yesterday, to incrementally live for a better tomorrow. So I thought about it, and I've been trying to apply that in my life, as I'm sure I hope that you see. And from there, I said, hey, you know, if we're trying to go with the perspective of being better than we were yesterday, we're trying to transcend the reality that we knew for a better reality. So
I love it.
Ultimately, we're just trying to keep pushing forward.
I love it. You know, I think that idea of becoming 1% better is really important.
For sure.
And when I think about, you know, what it means for me, it definitely is helpful to hear what yours is, but also just to be like, all right, how can I improve, whether that's mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and gain insight so that I can continue to become better than I was yesterday, just be the best version I can be. And I think that that's incredibly important, especially now for us. You know, this is a pivotal moment in our lives. You know, you're 17, 18, right?
17, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to college next year. And so it's important to not become lost in the messiness of life, but to really kind of flourish into whoever we're meant to be, one day at a time, which is the important thing. And involves patience. But yeah, so we're on the same page there. We're going to talk about optimistic nihilism today. And I've spoken a lot with you about this, but if you want to kind of dive in deeper into what that is exactly, Was there a moment in which you were like, yeah, like this is how I want to live my life? I know you talked about how, your parents kind of instilled in you certain values, and indirectly molded you into somebody who practices optimistic nihilism. But I'd be curious to hear more about what you have to say there.
Definitely. I think a good place to start with that would be for the audience and for whomever might be listening to this, what optimistic nihilism is. So to deconstruct it, optimism, that's so straightforward. Like, we try to live happy. We try to hope for a good future. Straightforward, really straightforward there. And nihilism is almost like the opposite of what optimism is. So it's kind of funny putting those two words together.
Sure.
It's not about pessimism. Nihilism is really that, look, we're alive, we're in this world, we're in this universe, and majority of us aren't really born with the purpose. We're not born as into royalty, destined to lead countries, or
Sure.
I don't know, we're not destined to really do anything. So if we don't have a purpose that we can clearly see, what's the point? And that's the story of nihilism. So optimistic nihilism is that, hey, look, we don't have a purpose. There aren't any accomplishments or achievements that we have to hit, like a video game or a movie in our real world.
Sure.
But if that's the case, what's stopping us from building our own why and then relentlessly driving towards that?
Right.
So that's literally the gist of what optimistic nihilism is.
Creating your why. And we've talked about, I think some people are really fortunate to kind of know what that is early on. Some people are still figuring that out, or maybe it comes really late in life. And it's a change. But I think the point that you're making is also like, we only have here and now too. And I think that, and you'll talk about this a little bit more later, but like this, creating this citadel, right? And you'll talk about that. But kind of just being in the moment and living for the moment, but also creating your why, living your why. And so I think that's really important.
Exactly. Yeah. And, bouncing right off that whole thing of there's only the now. One of my all-time favorite movies is Kung Fu Panda.
Great movie. Jack Black.
Right?
Great.
Yeah. So, of course, Master Shifu, Poe's master and his trainer, he had this seriously incredible quote, which is that time is an illusion and there's only now. I'm definitely not qualified at all to talk about the philosophy of time or the science of time. But I mean, as I think I speak for the both of us, that we're seekers of truth, that as far as we can tell, there's only the now.
Right.
We can't go and relive the past or change what we did.
Sure.
Nor can we jump in the future and figure out what we got to do and then come back to the present and do it. Right. We just got to do what we have to do right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's really well said.
Thank you, Andrew.
So back to my original question of like, was there a moment in time when you were like, this is it? I'm going to commit to living the now. I'm going to commit to living this or practicing optimistic nihilism. What was that for you? If you could elaborate on that, that'd be great.
Again, it kind of started with the foundation. I like to think of parenting and of a good family environment like building a home. Things start on day one, and that's all with laying the foundation, building the base of the home. And if you have a good foundation, you could build a mansion, you can build like a skyscraper, whatever you want. But if you kind of skimp on that, if you kind of don't meaningfully take action and take charge of building that foundation, 20 years down the road when you're like, man, I want a better house, if you don't have that good foundation, it's going to crumble.
Right.
So all this kind of started with day one, with my mom and dad teaching it to me, not really officially, calling it, hey, I'm teaching you optimistic nihilism today.
Yeah.
But in a way, they kind of just taught me that. So over time in middle school, I came to learn what that was actually called. I came to realize what that way of life is. And I was like, oh, shoot, that's something that I've kind of practiced all along. But then I realized that I was still only scratching the tip of the iceberg with that.
Yeah.
So then when I started doing my travels to Sri Lanka for microfinance, or whether I was doing other projects or really anything, coming to Hill.
Yeah.
these are all sort of moments that taught me how deep optimistic nihilism and other philosophies can really take a person.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. But yeah, another question I want to ask you is like, what were some of the benefits to really diving into, I'm going to practice this. And is there differences that you've seen in fully committing to this now that you look back at certain periods of your life and be like, wow, I'm really grateful that I did commit to that. All right. A lot about the benefits of practicing this life.
Yep.
And so I want to know, like, are there certain periods where you've had moments where you've kind of been in the dumps, and how do you continue to live in accordance with this practice?
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, there are huge benefits to really just creating your why, because that's all what optimistic nihilism is, creating the reason you're alive.
Right.
So, I mean, I started, we could say that I started when I was a kid. I officially learned it when I was a little older, but it's almost like taking cold showers,
Yeah.
When you start, you take it for like 5 seconds and you're like, screw it, I can't do any more of this. But then, you get in phases where you can do it for a little longer, and then you're like, okay, too much. I gotta take a step back. But then after, I don't know, X amount of time, you just do it, and you're like, hey, this is what's natural to me.
Right.
So in a way, it's very much so the same thing with practicing this way of life. That when I started really, really actively doing it in my middle school time, I was, I was like a kid. I was trying to figure things out, and I didn't even know at that point why I was alive and what I could do with the years of my life.
Right.
So, I was still trying to practice it and go with the flow of that way of life. But if I look back at that time, if I look back before I even started officially doing it, and if I look at myself today when I have what I call a life mission,
right,
I see huge differences in everything, really, my whole life, because it sets so many priorities straight. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yeah.
That when you feel a deep desire to do something, you'll prioritize it.
Mm-hmm. No, so, for sure.
In a way, just like that.
And do you find that surrounding yourself with certain people, like what are essentials that you're like, I need this in order to live this? So is that people? Is that taking time? I know you meditate. I think that would be interesting to talk about. Like what are the essentials for you? And I know they're going to be different for everybody.
Of course.
But it's like, I need this in order to live this. So what is that for you?
Yeah. To start off with this question, each and every one of us, we go through ups and downs in life, and it's natural, that at some points we feel naturally like we're like the king or the queen of the world, and then there are times when we feel like we're trying to even get by just for like a couple minutes.
Yeah, man.
So it's totally understandable with how those type of things are.
When I think about this kind of stuff. And again, it's going to be different for you, but I think it's really important for me when I have moments of kind of like despair and stuff. And there's a certain life I want to live. I mean, I'm Catholic. And so when I try to live in accordance with my faith, and live like Christ, I think that it's really important for me to surround myself with people. And I'm not saying other, Catholic people or Christian people, it's good for me to surround myself with a wide variety of people, but who are consistent in becoming better than they were, and are consistent to living just a good life and taking care of people. I think somebody put it really well for me. I was going through a tough time, and I kind of found myself plateauing, whether it was in sports or in athletics, which is the same thing. I meant to say academics, but just in various places of my life, I found myself plateauing. I kept hitting a wall, and I was really frustrated. And I was like, I want to be better. And people talk. I want to be the best athlete. I want to be the best student. I want to be the best speaker, or the best friend, or whatever. And this person told me, they're like, you're being selfish, pretty much. They're like, if you want to be the best at anything, it starts with one thing, and that's caring about other people. And so in moments of, I guess you could say, despair in my life, or doubt or frustration, I found actually that going in and just reaching out to people who might be going through a hard time too. Finding one, you're not alone in those moments of frustration. I know a lot of people are feeling that right now.
Yeah.
And it will continue at times. But to find people, know you're not alone, one, but two, reach out. And that also is nice for me because it gives me a sense of purpose in terms of helping people. And that happens in a variety of ways, and it doesn't need to be extreme. It could be something like this and having a conversation with somebody. So I think for me, it's really important to, one, surround myself with people and know that you're not alone necessarily in any of it. And to find strength in others. And so that's kind of something that I've tried to practice when I think about living, an optimistic life and also just a life well lived, that even in, the tougher moments, I'm still serving a purpose. And that could be helping other people. And that actually, what's really cool about that is that it transforms what might suck and make it a really beautiful gift, not only for yourself, but somebody else. And so I think that's something that I've tried to do throughout my life, and I'll continue.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad you share that, Andrew. And I mean, the more and more we talk, of course, yeah, I seriously see that we are in the same boat with the way we try to approach life. And with going right back to your point of caring for others and trying to make sure that someone or people around us can breathe a little easier because we're there. I think that that's such beautiful stuff to take the feeling that you have when you're in the dumps, when you have that sort of strangeness, that animosity maybe towards life or yourself or anybody, and you can use that to fuel helping others. And ultimately, just like you were saying, that helps yourself.
Right.
Because seeing someone else have a smile, seeing that you are making a difference, a positive one too, that ought to bring a good smile to your face.
It's contagious, man. It really is. I mean, you think about it, and it's important to do that. And I think the byproduct of that, I said I felt like I was plateauing, whether it was in the weight or on tests and stuff like that. And I was just frustrated. I was like, gosh, what is it that's going to push me ahead and get me over this hurdle? And you might find sometimes it takes longer than, it might take months, it might take years or something. But if you stick to taking care of other people and caring about other people genuinely, you'll find, at least I have, that the byproduct of that, whatever it is some form of success. And if your mission, we're talking about transcending reality, becoming better than we were yesterday, that's your mission, right? You're actually accomplishing that and doing that. And that it might not show up on a stat sheet or on a test result immediately, but you'll find that you're making a difference. So there is success in that, and I think learning how to embrace it is really important.
I love it. And I think that nicely relates to a couple experiences of my own when I was traveling in Sri Lanka for my microfinance. So the reason, first of all, I went to Sri Lanka and we even started this whole thing is, I think you might remember this from my chapel talk. Right. It was after I came to realize, my eyes open to how inefficient our world society is in, trying to elevate the people who need it most, the people who are in poverty, the people who don't have opportunities and resources because they literally don't live in countries that promote and incentivize that sort of lifestyle. So I was shocked by that. And when I went to Sri Lanka...
Just real quick. Yeah, all right, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just to give people, if you could provide some perspective geographically as to where it is, that I think that'd be really helpful. Sorry, I cut you off mid, but...
That's okay. So Sri Lanka is like a little island right off the east coast of India. The southeastern tip of India, I should be more specific.
Right.
So right there in the Indian Ocean.
Awesome.
So we went there, and
okay. Sorry, I cut you off. You can run through that.
No, that's okay. That's okay, man. Really, that's okay.
I think there's a lag or something.
Yeah, there's something going on, but we should be okay.
Yeah, we're good. You keep going. I'm sorry, man.
I'm glad you also brought that up, Andrew, because I'll give some perspective as to why we even ended up in that country of all places.
Yeah, so that'd be interesting.
For sure. We don't have family in Sri Lanka. We've never even been there. It wasn't even on our radar before 2015 when I started doing my research on it. But when we went there and when we started doing our research, we came to see how the market for microfinance was not saturated. There's a lot of room to grow there, and there were a lot of people willing to start creating businesses and social enterprises to help themselves and help other people. So when we got there, we saw crazy abject poverty, but we also saw a lot of people who were doing well, who were
Right.
economically successful, financially well off. And even with that crazy disparity, I mean, it exists in San Fran, it exists here in Philly,
Sure.
everywhere in
Yeah.
the world. But what fascinated me was that those people who were even in abject poverty, who were living in clay huts, going in lakes to take showers in the morning, each and everything that they did, they had a smile. They
Yeah.
weren't crying or complaining that, hey, why do I not have a faucet full of clean water? Why do I not have home cooked meals? They were instead cherishing what they actually had. So
Right.
that touches on a Stoic idea that true richness, to be a rich person, is to be satisfied and to be happy with what you have, and instead of to
Right.
long for what you don't have. So
Yeah.
I was
That's a
blown
super
away.
point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Asheville, North Carolina for a time,
Wow.
and it has one of the largest homeless populations in the states. And I would go to the homeless shelter on Wednesdays. Actually, our school had a like enrichment program that would go there,
Yeah, yeah,
and I was blown away. And you were talking about this too. These people seem like some of the happiest people on earth, and I was like, how could you be so happy with so little? And I think learning to live with less was actually a I mean, this is an extreme. I mean, we're talking about homeless people. You're talking about people that live in huts, in
yeah,
bathe in lakes, but yet they're incredibly hopeful. They're some of the most hopeful people you'll ever meet, and so I was really blown away and inspired by that too. So I
exactly.
didn't mean to interject there, but yeah, I think it's important, and I think at times people should learn to live with less.
Yeah,
It doesn't need to just be financially, but you're gonna have moments where you're going to be learning to live with less. That could be socially too. I think people are experiencing less social interaction, and it really forces you to reconsider what it is that matters and
exactly.
what it is that's necessary to lead a happy life. So I just wanted to touch on that. But it is
Yeah,
remarkable, and they're incredibly inspiring people.
definitely, definitely. They keep going.
Yeah,
It's amazing. And I'm glad we talked about this, Andrew, because I've been thinking recently that we come to school, we
yeah,
see other students around us, maybe at Hill, maybe anywhere else, really,
sure.
and I mean, in movies, in the media, we always see the students being portrayed as little crybabies, always stressed out,
Yeah, yeah,
and people are. I mean, this is a reality. I don't want to put anybody down because there is stress that comes with homework, college acceptances.
right, right.
No doubt, that's real.
Relative.
What was that?
Yeah, it's relative.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
yes, it's relative. It's
That's
relative.
what I was. I know where you're going, sir. We have that connection. Episode 1, but this is a dynamic duo. So yeah, no, it's all relative. Keep going.
Yeah. So exactly, it's all relative. And even though, there are tests that stress us out, there are projects or college acceptances, even at that point where we feel at our worst, we must remember that we are alive.
Yeah,
And I mean, there are a lot of people with mental illnesses who feel
sure.
depressed, who feel sad, or perpetually anxious about things. And to them, I have to say that if people who are living in Asheville homeless, if there are people living in Sri Lanka, in San Francisco, in Philadelphia, without homes, in huts, taking showers maybe twice a month, what are you doing complaining about a test or maybe a college that didn't accept you when those people are still smiling, when they don't even know what it means to have a test,
Right.
what it means to even go to a college?
Sure. No, I think that's a really important point, and it's touching on the idea of really having perspective, and that's another thing, like in moments that they're hard to bear and to go through. There's
Yeah.
actually a meditation technique. We learned this last year in psychology, and
Uh-huh.
it was when you're feeling anxious, right? Or you might have gotten a result back. You said test, so sticking in that theme. You get a test back you don't like, and you're just like, how could I even continue with my day? I studied for this test. You know, I went the extra help. I did all this stuff that was necessary to achieve my idea of success on this exam, and yet it didn't happen. And you're frustrated. You're like, okay, where do I go from here? Or, you know, I don't even want to go from here.
Right.
You're just in this moment of despair. To close your eyes and think about yourself where you are, and just expand your perspective. So for us, we go to the Hill School, right?
Yeah.
You close your eyes, you imagine yourself, right? You're the center point, and you just think of everybody at the Hill School. Start thinking about some people there. And maybe you find that some people are sharing that same experience that you had on that test or something, or you know your friend, his parents just got diagnosed with cancer or something like that. So you start thinking about them. And then you start thinking, all right, locally, we're going to think about Pottstown now. What is going on in the world of Pottstown? And you see a lot of people living in poverty. There's crime. And there's kids that aren't able to go to school right now because of COVID, right? And then you expand a little bit more and a little more. And then you realize that at the end of the day, your test that didn't go as planned becomes something that, you know, it's really, not to say that it's meaningless, but at the end of the day, it could be a lot worse. And that's not to say like, oh, don't feel bad, because I understand it can carry the same weight to you, and that's important. I don't want to, you know, disregard people who are struggling with certain things, or might feel like they're going through a hardship. But back to my point earlier, in thinking about other people, you're able to, I think, better understand the magnitude or the significance or the insignificance of a test like that, right? And what it actually, how it's actually going to impact your life. And I think you'll find I've done poorly on tests, like really poorly. And
I feel you there.
No longer a burden I carry or something I think about. And so that exercise of perspective is something that's really important, and I think can be helpful.
For sure. I think that's a really fantastic, you know, like tool to have in everybody's arsenal.
Right.
And right after this next point, I'm going to get into a little bit about another philosophy, Stoicism, and the inner citadel. So what's really interesting about our school system and society in general is that we see a lot of people who, as a byproduct of their experiences in school and in life, they get depression. They get issues that they acquire issues, shall we put it, whether it affect their body or their mind. Because I mean, let's focus on little babies and newborns. What are they afraid of? What do they feel anxious of? I don't know. Maybe they're afraid of falling. Maybe they're afraid of not being with their mom and dad. A fire. Those are all really, I believe, things that are in us somehow by some sort of evolutionary instinct.
Sure.
But are they afraid of another baby looking at them and judging their clothes? I don't think so. Or are they afraid of taking a test or doing something and then failing it? Again, I really doubt that, because they approach so much of life with a childlike curiosity. They're always curious, and they don't let the results stop them. They think, and this is something my dad taught me, they don't win or lose. They either win or grow.
Yeah.
So it's my deep hope that in our lifetime, we can see each human being, whether they're here in the US, whether they're in China, or whether they're in India, wherever in the world, that each human being can understand the power of relativity, how everything is relative. And particularly that these sorts of things in our life have meaning. Of course, tests have meaning, friendships have meaning, people have meaning. But often we have to understand what matters to us and go towards that and just do it.
And I think this whole point of like growing. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
But this whole point of growing from experiences, and it's this idea of touching the hot stove. And at first, it's actually really important to touch that stove to know, wow, that feels horrible, and I never want to do that again. But when you continue to leave your hand on the hot stove, right, a bad example, for instance, and you continue to dwell on that, it becomes a bad experience. instead of one that you learn from, right? And you can make something really beautiful out of a tribulation or something like that,
Yeah.
and grow from that. And I think what happens is we keep reflecting on bad things that happen instead of good things, right? And when you reflect back, right, it's one thing to touch a stove, be like, I don't like that, and then move forward and learn from that. It's another thing to continue to stay there and to dwell on it. And so when you continue to dwell on, bad experiences that you had, instead of moving forward and taking it,
Sure, yeah.
growing from it, right? It really starts to shape the way you think. And you can do it in a good way and a bad way. I mean, there's great experiences that people have. How many people are really reflecting on great things that happened to them in the past and reliving that? Because you can relive those emotions.
Yeah.
And duplicate that, and then you create a positive mentality. And it's the same thing with visualization. I think people are terrified of public speaking. I'm guilty of it too, and I'm trying to get better at it. But when we think about public speaking, we're always thinking about like, oh, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? And so then we automatically are associating a negative response to the idea of public speaking. Now, what if we reflect on public speaking, right? You might have an experience and you're visualizing, right? For your chapel talk, for instance.
Yeah.
You can also visualize it going tremendously well. You get a standing ovation. People are sending you texts or calling you saying, this is the greatest thing ever. But you're laughing now, you're smiling, but that's a positive thing. And you can take that and associate something that might make you uncomfortable and visualize success. And that's really important, I think, in developing a mindset of positivity. And it will carry you through. And I think you'll find that when you actually are public speaking, for instance, right, it goes actually very well. Because you can speak. I mean, sure, I might be afraid of public speaking, but I'm having a normal conversation with you now. Exactly. And so I have the capability to do that. And so it's to believing that.
Yeah. You made a perfect point regarding, like from the childhood thing, that we don't experience those sorts of pains, or should I say more specifically, those fears or, a little bit of timidity when it comes to public speaking or anything. And the best way to overcome that is to change our mindset.
Right.
And if there is one thing that we've seen from all of our talking right now, mindset plays a huge role in our lives. When you're public speaking, you can either imagine, oh shoot, it's going to go bad. You can imagine everything that could possibly go wrong.
Right.
Or you can imagine everything that could go right.
Right.
Or, I mean, you can have like a realistic view that, hey, I might do really well. Some people might not like it, but I know I'm going to go for that really good outcome. And there was this one book by a guy named Adam Grant. He's a professor at Wharton.
Okay.
And he wrote this book called Originals. And there was something that was just groundbreaking in that, where he said that the key to overcome something like public speaking fear, he said that specifically, it's good to feel amped up. You can do your power poses and you can, repeat to yourself, yeah, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to do great.
Yeah.
And when he asked them to say that, yeah, I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling good, they did pretty well. When he told them to say things that would make them more anxious or nervous, of course, they did really bad.
Yeah.
But then when he told them to say, I'm feeling excited, they performed the best out of any group just by saying, hey, I'm feeling excited. So really, merging your point, my point, and Adam Grant's point on envisioning a good future, envisioning a good outcome, and bringing out that excitement, that can lead to massive changes in outcomes, because inputs are outputs after all.
Right. Yeah.
And that leads me to another point on, that public speaking thing. I'm sure you've had this happen. I had this happen a couple of times when I was a kid, that, you go to a stage or you go to a podium and, you're like shaking a little bit, your hands are getting a little sweaty. Yeah. You're like, oh shoot.
Yeah.
And, you're so many thoughts are just going through your head. And we always label that as I'm nervous or I'm anxious.
Excitement.
Exactly. But when you're on a roller coaster, I mean, what's something that you like? Do you like video games or maybe movies or roller coasters, something like that?
Yeah, I love roller coasters.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So let's say like you're getting on a crazy roller coaster, like King Ka, the biggest one,
Yeah.
and you're like your heartbeat's going
Yeah.
nuts, hands are getting a little sweaty, thoughts are going in your head. If I did not say give you the context of where you were, those sound pretty similar. Nervousness and being excited. So
Yeah.
what's stopping us from relabeling that nervousness when we're on the stage or on a Zoom call or whatever, and relabeling it as being excited? Because I
Yeah.
think that could have huge, huge differences.
And also in your performance too, you mentioned it. Mike Tyson one time said, I mean, this is one of the greatest boxers of all time, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was the man. And he said, before fights, somebody asked him if he would get nervous before fights or if he was scared. And he said, originally I thought it was me being nervous, but I had done all the preparation, right?
yeah,
I trained hard and I was gaining experience and I found out I was really excited. But the key then is to make friends with that feeling, that feeling in your stomach, like the butterflies people call it, right? And to embrace that and love that feeling. And if you can turn it into like this is make it a strength in a way, that feeling, because you've been there before, what it's like. It's uncomfortable, but at the same time you've mastered it almost. You
yeah.
can really improve your performances in whatever that is. He was a boxer. He's one of the best boxers of all time. I'm sure public speakers all have that kind of flutter in their stomach, but if you can be like, I've experienced this before, and you can make friends with that
Yeah,
feeling of that feeling of it being uncomfortable,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You end up surprising yourself in the end, and then it becomes something that you don't necessarily. You can be excited, but you might not have those kind of flutters that make you feel nervous or whatever, or you might associate with being nervous.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. I think that's really a fantastic point you made about befriending that feeling.
Yeah.
Being instead of pushing it away, we like to disassociate that nervousness. We like to say that we can just conquer it by brute force, but
Right.
instead by becoming one with it. I mean, would you say that you could let that power you to become even better at whatever you're doing, boxing, speaking?
Oh yeah, I think that in athletics and stuff, you always have that feeling too before games. I play football, and it's a violent game, and so there's obviously the thoughts of like like what could happen, because there's definitely injuries that happen in the sport. But if you think like that, you end up finding that you become very timid, right? And you end up kind of you're not able to perform at the level that you should be performing at, right? You've prepared all week for it. You've been lifting in the summers and stuff like that. You've
Yeah.
watched film. And so if you can master that feeling, if you will, if you can make friends with that feeling, you'll find that when you're out there doing your thing, after like the first hit or whatever, that feeling of uneasiness goes away. Or after, when you're public speaking, that first paragraph's out of the way, that intro, right? It's done, it's out of the way. And if you can end up befriending, like I was saying, that
Yeah.
feeling, you'll find that really you just kind of do your thing and you relax, and the byproduct of that is much greater than would be if you're constantly running through all the different scenarios in your head of what could go wrong, and then you kind of just get lost in the flow of it. And
Yeah.
when that happens, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's really fun, and you can use that in multiple places in your life. I'm reading a book right now, and it had to do with sales and this idea. A lot of guys were getting really nervous before they were giving a big sales pitch.
Oh.
And when they ended up taking a step away, right? When they were really nervous, first of all, it didn't go well, right? But when they take a step back and they put it in perspective, we're talking about perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the worst that could happen here? They end up feeling much better, and they're able to go perform at a level that's more consistent with what they're able to achieve, if that makes sense.
For sure, yeah. I think this is all really just tying into how we can live a life well lived, how we can achieve that. And again, it's relative. For someone across the country in California, they may have a different definition of what success means,
Sure.
of what living a life well lived means. Between you and me, maybe there might be some differences. So even though it's relative, our perspective of the world, our perspective of ourself and everything around us plays easily, I would say like 90% of a role in leading that life well lived, of attaining success.
Yeah. No, for sure. I agree.
So we can definitely talk a little bit about optimistic nihilism, and I'll also now jump into stoicism
Yeah.
and the whole idea of the inner citadel.
Yeah.
So to start explaining what stoicism means, I'll share a little story. So let's say, Andrew, you're the man, of course, and let's say that you have a girlfriend,
Okay.
and this she's like the love of your life, and you guys have been together for a little while, and
Right.
you guys are just having a blast being together. So you guys are going over, doing whatever you guys got to do, enjoying time. Don't need to get into specifics there. You know,
Yeah.
you guys are having fun, and some time passes, and you wake up one day, and she leaves a note. She leaves a note on the front door, and she's saying that, look, we've had a good run. It was great knowing you and everything, but it just hasn't been working out, and
Yeah.
that's gonna hurt. That's gonna
It
hurt. You're
was.
gonna,
I would be confused and probably in the dumps, to say the least.
yeah, naturally, of course, you're gonna feel pretty sad. You might cry a little bit, whatever might go through your head. But let's say after a week, you're watching the TV and you're flipping through the news, and you see that there was some massive serial killer found, and this person was apprehended. So you're like, oh shoot, let me tune in and see what's going on here. So you're hearing about how this person found different people, and at their homes or at her home, she would just get rid of them, and they had no idea what was going on. And after some time, you're watching this, you're hearing everything, and you realize it was the girl you were with. So you're like, well, I'm glad I'm not in that anymore, and that you were not killed. So
Right.
it's insane how much your perspective changes your entire outlook on everything.
Yeah.
At one point, you were in the dumps, you were feeling really, really sad about that. And now you're like, thank God for that happening. So that's really what Stoicism is all about. It's the difference between our perspective and what can influence our perspective and
Sure.
what happens internally and externally around us.
Okay. Awesome.
So that's really what Stoicism is all about. And getting into the inner citadel, all it really is creating a force field, as we put it, around us, around our very being, so that no matter what happens to you, meaning verbally or anything like that, of course, a punch can hurt you, a kick can hurt you,
Right.
whatever, but a person's intentions verbally may not have the same effect. If someone's trying to rile you up, get you angry, with an inner citadel, you may not be as susceptible to these sort of external factors, because the creation of it comes with the understanding that I have control over myself. I have control over my reactions to things. I don't have control over the person trying to rile me up. I
Right.
don't have control over anything outside of my own doing or people who I really know, that sort of thing.
Right. Right.
And from that understanding, it kind of frees us. So,
Hmm.
of course, I'm 17. I'm practicing it. I feel like I have a good grasp, but there are still so many people who know so much more about it.
Sure.
But from what I can say from my experience, it's a powerful thing to be aware of the differences between what you and I can control
Right.
and what we don't control.
And I want to ask you a question, Samir, and this is
Yeah.
going to be a tricky one, but what would you say to somebody who's experienced some form of trauma? Obviously, we obviously come from very loving families. We go to boarding school. We've lived a very good life so far.
For
But
sure.
what if somebody said, and not to say that we haven't experienced challenges or anything like that, but what if somebody who just experienced a trauma was like, how could I, I didn't control what happened. How could I live optimistically? How could I practice stoicism now after having just experienced one of the worst experiences I could possibly imagine? And you're telling me, you're talking about perspective and stuff like that, but I feel like my life sucks and this is horrible. What do you say to that person?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Andrew, because see, that's the whole point of everything we're talking about. We talk about these ideas, we talk about these big concepts. At the end of the day, it all comes down to how we practically apply it.
Right.
So with Stoicism, it's a pretty old idea, and recently, in I think the 1900s to mid 1900s, And for everyone viewing, for you, don't quote me on that. And there was a way of thinking that became a science, which doctors and professors drew upon Stoicism to create a system of helping trauma patients. So at that time, there was World War II, there was all of the Holocaust survivors, so on, and a crazy amount of trauma. Of course, no doubt, that is a horrible thing to experience. So what these people did, there was a man by the name of Viktor Frankl. He was a huge proponent of taking Stoicism and really applying it in the world of psychology and practical daily thinking, where he took this Stoic idea, and whether he had a World War II veteran who had PTSD, or he had someone who had to go through one of the labor camps, what the whole process was understanding what caused the trauma, and whether it was something of that person's own doing, or whether that was something by someone else's doing that was enforced on them. So of course, the labor camps, that's a tragedy in our history. That's a horrible part of our history.
Right.
And it wasn't something that the people who had to endure put on themselves.
Sure.
It's something they were forced to endure. So the whole process is of understanding that, when it comes to words, when it comes to ideas, when it comes to even being physically hurt, you may experience the reaction that your body gives, because that's evolutionary, how we're built to work. But if we choose not to be harmed, if we choose not to feel that we have been harmed, it's within our power not to actually be harmed. So that's one of my favorite quotes from Stoicism, because yes, someone can throw all the worst words at us, name us whatever they want to. And some of us have experienced that. Plenty of the people who survived World War II experienced that. But at the end of the day, those are words. Those are just little pockets of air vibrating in our throat that come out of a person's mouth. So words are a different thing. Any people can overcome that with the training of Stoicism and this psychology, this science created by Viktor Frankl and other people. But when it comes to actions, there are a lot of people who have experienced horrible traumas, again, relating to wars, disasters, childhood issues. And I feel a tremendous amount of empathy for those people. And honestly, if there's one thing I can share with anybody right now, is a little story. It's on transcendreality.net. You can check that out.
Good plug.
Little plug, yeah. So the story goes that there was this very happy family. It was a mom, it was a dad, and their 2 sons. And I mean, if you imagine, like that white picket fence, nice little suburban home, whatever, that was them. They were enjoying their time together. And all of a sudden the mom got diagnosed with cancer. Of course, that threw a huge monkey wrench in the whole thing. That the 2 sons, they're kids, they're maybe 10, whatever. And the dad is working a job, and he's trying to bring food to the table for his family, and knowing that he may lose his wife and the mother of his children. So after some time, it looks like things are getting bad. And of course, that can't be that good for the family.
Right. So
the dad starts resorting to a couple of things like alcohol and other ways to let go of that stuff. And, of course, after binging that sort of stuff, it affects the children too. So after a while, we don't know what happens to the mom, but the dad just goes down a rabbit hole of that craziness, of alcohol, of a little bit of abuse and all that stuff. And his 2 sons experience that craziness. And then after 20 years, 30 years, when the 2 sons split path, when they left their home and their dad was doing whatever he was doing, they got together one day, not by themselves coming together, but because of a little test, and without even knowing that they were together. So one brother came in one room, and then another brother came in a room right next to that room. And the first brother was asked by a scientist or the researcher, whomever, that how did you become an alcoholic? What happened to you? You guys were living such good lives, and why did you go down the same rabbit hole as your dad did? And what just happened? And all the while that conversation's going on in the other room, we see the other brother. And again, they haven't been in contact with each other, but you see this guy, he is a super successful financially and emotionally business person. He has a loving family, his wife and a couple of children, whomever, and he does a lot of philanthropic work, giving back to people who were in similar circumstances. And another researcher is saying, dude, how are you like this?
Yeah.
You were living a great life, but then your dad resorted to horrible things. So how are you nothing like that? And the most amazing thing, Andrew, was both of these people at the same time, the alcoholic son who went down drugs, a messed up life, and the son who was happy, who was bringing value to the world, who was trying to help people to not live through that. They both said, well, because of how my dad was, how can I not be like this? So, I was blown away by that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
That how perspective plays so much of a role in our lives, whether it be through practicing stoicism, whether it be through getting through a tough patch in our life or a really traumatic part of our life, like these kids. Our perspective and the ways of life and philosophies that we practice are what can fuel that fire within us to keep going forward to a better future.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that story. Yeah.
Definitely, Andrew. So I think we covered a lot of good stuff on philosophy, on leading a life well lived, on practical tips to get people started.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of time left. So why don't we talk a little bit about what else we can do to lead a life well lived? So we can definitely talk a little bit about optimistic nihilism, and I'll also now jump into stoicism and the whole idea of the inner citadel.
Yeah.
So to start explaining what stoicism means, I'll share a little story. So let's say, Andrew, you're the man, of course, and let's say that you have a girlfriend.
Okay.
And she's like the love of your life, and you guys have been together for a little while, and
Right.
you guys are just having a blast being together. So you guys are going over, doing whatever you guys got to do, enjoying time. Don't need to get into specifics there.
Yeah.
You guys are having fun, and some time passes, and you wake up one day, and she leaves a note. She leaves a note on the front door, and she's saying that, look, we've had a good run. It was great knowing you and everything, but it just hasn't been working out. And that's gonna hurt. That's gonna hurt.
I would be confused and probably in the dumps, to say the least.
Yeah, naturally, of course. Of course, you're gonna feel pretty sad. You might cry a little bit, whatever might go through your head. But let's say after a week, you're watching the TV and you're flipping through the news, and you see that there was some massive serial killer found, and this person was apprehended. So you're like, oh shoot, let me tune in and see what's going on here. So you're hearing about how this person found different people, and at their homes or at her home, she would just get rid of them. And they had no idea what was going on. And after some time you're watching this, you're hearing everything, and you realize it was the girl you were with. So you're like, well, I'm glad I'm not in that anymore and that you were not killed. So It's insane how much your perspective changes your entire outlook on everything.
Yeah.
At one point, you were in the dumps. You were feeling really, really sad about that. And now you're like, thank God for that happening. So that's really what Stoicism is all about. It's the difference between our perspective and what can influence our perspective and what happens internally and externally around us.
Okay, awesome.
So that's really what Stoicism is all about. And getting into the inner citadel, all it really is creating a force field, as we put it, around us, around our very being. so that no matter what happens to you, meaning verbally or anything like that, of course, a punch can hurt you, a kick can hurt you,
Right,
whatever, but a person's intentions verbally may not have the same effect. If someone's trying to rile you up, get you angry with an inner citadel, you may not be as susceptible to these sort of external factors, because the creation of it comes with the understanding that I have control over myself. I have control over my reactions to things. I don't have control over the person trying to rile me up. I
right,
don't have control over anything outside of my own doing or people who I really know, that sort of thing.
right, right.
And from that understanding, it kind of frees us. So,
Hmm.
of course, I'm 17. I'm practicing it. I feel like I have a good grasp, but there are still so many people who know so much more about it.
Sure.
But from what I can say from my experience, it's a powerful thing to be aware of the differences between what you and I can control
Right.
and what we don't control.
And I want to ask you a question, Samir, and this is
Yeah,
gonna be a tricky one, but what would you say to somebody who's experienced some form of trauma? Obviously, we've lived. We obviously come from very loving families. We go to boarding school. We've lived a very good life so far.
for
But
sure.
what if somebody said, and not to say that we haven't experienced challenges or anything like that,
Of
but
course,
what if
yeah.
somebody just experienced a trauma, was like, how could I, I didn't control what happened. How could I live optimistically? How could I practice stoicism now after having just experienced one of the worst experiences I could possibly imagine? And you're telling me, you're talking about perspective and stuff like that, but I feel like my life sucks and this is horrible. What do you say to that person?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Andrew. Because see, that's the whole point of everything we're talking about. We talk about these ideas, we talk about these big concepts. At the end of the day, it all comes down to how we practically apply it.
Right.
So with Stoicism, it's a pretty old idea, and recently, in I think the 1900s to mid 1900s, and for everyone viewing, for you, don't quote me on that. And there was a way of thinking that became a science, which doctors and professors drew upon Stoicism to create a system of helping trauma patients. So at that time, there was World War II, there was all of the Holocaust survivors, so on, and a crazy amount of trauma. Of course, no doubt, that is a horrible thing to experience. So what these people did, there was a man by the name of Viktor Frankl. He was a huge proponent of taking Stoicism and really applying it in the world of psychology and practical daily thinking, where he took this stoic idea, and whether he had a World War II veteran who had PTSD, or he had someone who had to go through one of the labor camps, what the whole process was understanding what caused the trauma, and whether it was something of that person's own doing, or whether that was something by someone else's doing that was enforced on them. So of
Mhm.
course, the labor camps, that's a
Yeah.
tragedy in our history. That's a horrible part of our history.
Right.
And it wasn't something that the people who had to endure put on themselves.
Sure.
It was
No, of
something
course.
they were forced to endure. So the whole process is of understanding that, when it comes to words, when it comes to ideas, when it comes to even being physically hurt, you may experience the reaction that your body gives, because that's evolutionary how we're built to
Right. Right.
work. But if we choose not to be harmed, if we choose not to feel that we have been harmed, it's within our power not to actually be harmed. So that's one of my favorite quotes from Stoicism, because yes, someone can throw all the worst words at us, name us whatever they want to, and some of us have experienced that. Plenty of the people who survived World War II experienced that. But at the end of the day, those are words. Those are just little pockets of air vibrating in our throat that come out of a person's mouth. So words are a different thing. Any people can overcome that with the training of Stoicism and this psychology, this science created by Viktor Frankl and other people. But when it comes to actions, there are a lot of people who have experienced horrible traumas, again, relating to wars, disasters, childhood issues. And I feel a tremendous amount of empathy for those people. And honestly, if there's one thing I can share with anybody right now, is a little story. It's on transcendreality.net. You can check that out.
Good plug.
Little plug, yeah. So the story goes that there was this very happy family. It was a mom, it was a dad, and their 2 sons. And I mean, if you imagine, like that white picket fence, nice little suburban home, whatever, that was them. They were enjoying their time together. And all of a sudden, the mom got diagnosed with cancer. Of course, that threw a huge monkey wrench in the whole thing. That the 2 sons, they're kids, they're maybe 10, whatever. And the dad is working a job, and he's trying to bring food to the table for his family, and knowing that he may lose his wife and the mother of his children. So after some time, it looks like things are getting bad. And of course, that can't be that good for the family.
Right. So
the dad starts resorting to a couple of things like alcohol and other ways to let go of that stuff. And, of course, after binging that sort of stuff, it affects the children too. So after a while, we don't know what happens to the mom, but the dad just goes down a rabbit hole of that craziness, of alcohol, of a little bit of abuse and all that stuff. And his 2 sons experience that craziness. And then after 20 years, 30 years, when the 2 sons split path, when they left their home and their dad was doing whatever he was doing, they got together one day, not by themselves coming together, but because of a little test, and without even knowing that they were together. So one brother came in one room, and then another brother came in a room right next to that room. And the first brother was asked by a scientist or the researcher, whomever, that, how did you become an alcoholic? What happened to you? You guys were living such good lives, and why did you go down the same rabbit hole as your dad did? And what just happened? And all the while that conversation's going on, in the other room, we see the other brother. And again, they haven't been in contact with each other, but you see this guy, he is a super successful financially and emotionally business person. He has a loving family, his wife and a couple of children, whomever, and he does a lot of philanthropic work, giving back to people who were in similar circumstances. And another researcher is saying, dude, how are you like this? Yeah. You were living a great life, but then your dad resorted to horrible things. So how are you nothing like that? And the most amazing thing, Andrew, was both of these people at the same time, the alcoholic son who went down drugs, a messed up life, and the son who was happy, who was bringing value to the world, who was trying to help people to not live through that. They both said, well, because of how my dad was, how can I not be like this? So, I was blown away by that.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
That how perspective plays so much of a role in our lives, whether it be through practicing stoicism, whether it be through getting through a tough patch in our life or a really traumatic part of our life, like these kids. Our perspective and the ways of life and philosophies that we practice are what can fuel that fire within us to keep going forward to a better future.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that story, yeah.
Definitely, Andrew. I think we covered a lot of good stuff on philosophy, on leading a life well lived, on practical tips to get people started.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of time left. So why don't we talk a little bit about what else we can do to lead a life well lived? And I think a good point to start would be our physical bodies. What do you think about that? I know you're an athlete.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. Is finding a way, an outlet, if you will. And your body in exercising your body is one of those ways that science has proven. It's very effective in clearing your mind. And so something that I've always tried to do is to work out. in some way at least 5 days a week. I mean, it will change depending on how busy you are. And it doesn't have to be a long one, but even if it's, like 50 push-ups, if you're getting started or something like that a day, right? That's not only something that you can feel good about, but you're exercising your body. And it's really important because if you want to be healthy mentally, you need to be healthy physically as well. And so carving out that time, and I can even look back at times in my life when I wasn't as physically active, and they were some of the hardest parts. I felt sluggish. And there were times where, I couldn't necessarily look back on my day and be like, you know what, I accomplished that. I know people that start their days working out because it sets the tone for the rest of their day. They wake up, they work out. All right, now everything kind of just falls out in place in front of them. And they're able to attack that knowing that, hey, I started the day challenging myself and I overcame that challenge. And that means I can overcome the challenges that are going to face me throughout the day. So I know people that work out in the morning. I do whenever I have time. I usually during the summers work out early in the day though.
It shows. It shows.
I appreciate that. But no, it's essential. Exactly. And I think a really great outlet. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I agree with you. And right on your point of how powerful exercise is, I became a huge proponent of exercise, of being healthy, whether it's eating, exercise, whatever, because first of all, you owe it to your body.
Yeah.
It's your vessel to do what you have to do in life. When you look at Kevin Hart, if you look at Elon Musk,
right.
If you look at anybody anywhere in the world who's achieved something, you have to keep your body in good shape in order to keep going for prolonged results.
Right.
Because if you're eating Twinkies, if you're gaining weight, and if you're not actively taking care of yourself,
right.
But going back to the point of exercise, a lot of people like to say that your body is like a Ferrari or your body is like a beautiful sports car. You got to take care of it. You put in the wrong
fuel. Give that premium gas.
What was that?
I said you got to give that premium gas, man.
Exactly. I was just about to say, like, if you put garbage gas, you're going to get garbage results.
Right.
So that goes with food. That goes with exercise, like you were just talking about.
Yeah, and you want to talk about transcending reality, that idea of giving yourself, the premium gas, if you will, so you can go the extra distance and you can maintain a good state. That transcends just your physical body. That's mentally. What are you consuming mentally? Emotionally, who are you surrounding yourself with? So that's something that transcends just the physical aspect of it.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, all things considered, we were just talking, you made that point that science proves that exercise is one of the most powerful tools we have to be happy, to be healthy, to lead a better life we'll live. That's what we're all about. And I remember there was a YouTube video, really good YouTube video it was like a video research paper. And the dude was saying that if there was a pill that could do what exercise does for you, it would be essentially a miracle pill. Because, I mean, there's so many neurotransmitters, there's like so much science behind what exercise does, that if we had a pill for that, I couldn't even begin to imagine the things that we as a species could be doing.
Yeah.
Just by one input.
Right. No, I mean, it's essential. It really is. And, if I were to give advice to people who like, because there are times in my life and, even during this quarantine period, I've like dreaded going to the gym but it starts just with something, and it could be like, I'm going to go for a run today, or maybe you skip running, right? You go for a walk, right? Sure. And I've heard of stories of people who are getting started on this just incredible physical transformation. Uh-huh. And when you're like, how do you do it? How do you even start going from, there's one guy, David Goggins. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yes.
Dave Goggins is the man. He's a machine, physically, mentally, emotionally, everything. 300-pound man who ended up becoming, right? He was making, I think it was like $1,200 a month spraying for cockroaches. And he was living, just in a bad way, physically. And he said one day he got up and he was like, I'm going to go for a run. And he ran for like 3 minutes. And that's how it started. And he just walked back. He said, I ran a little bit, and then I didn't want to do it anymore, and I went back. And so if I'm going to encourage you to start, I start with something. And if you don't like it, okay, stop. Push a little bit, but return to it the next day and try to go a little bit farther. And eventually you'll find that, okay, or something like that. And then you build off of that, but you need to start somewhere. And so even if that's getting outside one day and running for 3 minutes and stopping, at least you ran for 3 minutes, and that's building block. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Samir. And I'm not saying to quit easy, but it's a process. And so it involves time, and to reinforce that, just start with something really small and take incremental steps.
Exactly. I mean, one of my personal life mantras is just start. Just start. And over time, I've seen that if anybody can cultivate that sort of a strength to just start something, I mean, that is how you create value. That's how you create success, however way you define it.
Right.
Because if you just start, you're probably ahead of like the majority of people.
Yeah.
Anything.
And it doesn't have.
And David Goggins with his running.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be anything extreme. I think people get down a lot. They're like, oh, I want to get in shape or whatever. I want to be able to do this or that. And then they go and they turn to like social media and they see all these people who are just jacked. Or they go online and they look for a workout and the guy's doing it's kind of like an 8-pack or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not realistic for me or whatever. And
sure.
And so start with something small and don't necessarily write yourself off. Because, no, don't necessarily. Don't do it, period. Don't write yourself off based off of other people. And know that it's going to take time one way or another.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's not easy for me. I know that there are certain things in my life that I want to get better at. But to your point, Samir, it starts with just doing it. You got to do it at some point. And then from there, you build a foundation. But return to it and keep going back to it every day. Do something. So no, I think it's a great point.
For sure. And, why don't we just keep the snowball rolling down the hill?
Yeah. Man.
On top of that, just on top of just starting, I really think, from my humble perspective, that the two most important traits in a person for attaining something, achieving something is one, to start. Because of course, that's how you do something to begin with. Whether you're starting a workout to become a lacrosse star or a football star or an actor on Broadway or in Hollywood, it all comes down to what you start off with. And the second thing I really believe is consistency.
Yeah, man.
Back to it. If everybody in the world had the understanding and society teaching them that it's okay to be wrong sometimes, it's okay to fail, it's okay to grow from these sorts of experiences, and that it's of profound importance to start and to stay consistent, I honestly think like in 10 years we could be on the moon living there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, the idea that I don't like when people say stuff's impossible. I know we can think of things, but I mean, just look back at moments in history, and even today, there's really, we have some pretty wild imaginations, and when you think about it, there's a lot that is possible, and so the word impossible, I think, is ironic, especially when you look back at our history and see how much we've accomplished. Our species has been able to accomplish even in the past 10 years. I was talking to my brother about it the other day. Like, have you ever gone back and watched? Have you ever gone back? I know for me, like I was watching the NFL this weekend.
Uh-huh.
If you look back, even they were showing like highlights from like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Just technology. You look at the pay. Like, how did I watch this 10 years ago? Like,
yeah.
The picture I thought was horrible, but that's just like a very small thing, and it blows me away how much we're able to accomplish. I know that if you were to talk to my grandmother, and ask her, like, what she thought of mobile phones and stuff like that when she was in her teens, she'd be like, oh, that's impossible. Like, that's not, that would never happen. But she ended up selling them, in the 90s. She was one of the first people to work for Bell Atlantic and sell mobile phones. And she went around and nobody had them. was like late 80s, early 90s, and she would
Sure.
sell them to like doctors and stuff. But it's amazing what we think is impossible. That's actually very possible. And
Yeah.
so, but it starts with starting, and I think you'll surprise yourself along the way when it comes to physically working out.
Yeah, with your grandma, not even imagining these sorts of things. And there's this one quote, I don't remember who it's from, but there are actually two quotes. There's one is that impossible, the word itself, is one of the most ironic words in English because it's literally saying I'm possible.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, that's just the type of stuff that you gotta live your life with.
Right, man.
Everybody.
Yeah. You never know unless you try.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then there's another one. I keep it as a little sticky note with me that we can't see it on the camera, but it says it always seems impossible until it's done.
You know what? Since we're all in this idea of like pulling out notes and stuff, because I got some stuff actually in my room.
Yeah.
One of them, and I actually told this to Sajak when we were going to run for the SGA co-presidents and everything, because we were both like, I don't really know if this is it. She's like, I don't know if I'd win, but I said, and this quote's not credited to anybody. At least it doesn't say on this thing on my wall. But like, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail, and how would you live your life? And that's, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And like, what do you think about, like, when I think about times in my life where I've kind of held back and because I've been fearful of failure and rejection, there's a lot that I regret not having done. Because I was scared of rejection, or there's a lot that I ended up doing that I could have done earlier that was really beneficial for me because I was worried that I was going to fail. And I don't know where we got off track, but I think that our generation, especially, you have a lot of kids that are scared to fail. And so, when we were going through talking about podcast ideas, one of the podcasts that I was going to do before I jumped ship and joined with you, because I think it's the same message, but I was going to name it Permission to Fail. Because I think that we need to reinforce that failure is actually, like, it's essential to success.
Yes.
As odd as that might sound. You need to mess up. You need to have moments of rejection so that you can grow. Because if it's, you're going to have green lights in your life. I was reading a book by Matthew McConaughey. It's called Green Lights. And you're going to have those throughout your life. But every once in a while, you're going to hit a red light. But it's going to turn green eventually. It might not, be at the time you want it to be, or it might not necessarily result in what you want. But eventually, it will turn green. So take the jump. Fail if necessary. It's going to happen at times. But know that it's not the end, and just keep going until you hit a green light. Exactly.
That is life. If you're not, it's so important in our lives. We have our full life ahead of us, and there's so many people in our same boat. And even for the people who are, as we would refer to them societally, older, the elders of our families and so on, they still have life to live. They still have so much to impart, to learn, to keep imparting.
Yeah, man.
Honestly, like there's like a little phrase that if you're not failing, then you're likely not growing. And if you're not growing, that means you're probably not living. Because there's a difference between lying down on your bed and scrolling through Instagram and staring at walls and starting a podcast, starting a side hustle, going out to sports practice, even if the person is a tiny kid. But it's okay to fail because that can empower you to create a better podcast, create a better side hustle, a business, or become a better player in that sport.
Yeah. No, there's all these great examples of people who have failed multiple times throughout their career. Obviously, everybody talks about the tech companies, right? And the failures that Steve Jobs had. And I think that we watch like Wolf of Wall Street or something like that. And everybody thinks it's something that like happens overnight, but it didn't happen overnight for Jordan Belfort either. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have moments of like rejection and failure, and they're very real. And I think you shouldn't, obviously you don't want that, but in those moments you should almost welcome it in a way that it's like, okay, this happened.
Yeah.
It didn't go according to plan, but here's something that I learned from it. And then you transform that failure into the next step in your path. And that's a lot easier said than done. And to keep that
Yeah.
in, but it all goes back to keeping things in perspective. It's all relative.
Yeah.
And to grow from that.
And exactly, it all, everything really circles back to our perspective and our the ways of life that we practically employ in our world. Whether people do like a merge of stoicism and all the world religions and optimistic nihilism, everything circles back to the way we view the world,
Yeah.
because that's how our world is literally created. Going back in history, you know, whether everyone believes this or not, whether we did come from apes or not, it's insane that we went from grabbing sticks, poking them in holes, and trying to find like little berries and whatever to eat, to being the strongest species on the planet,
Right.
creating buildings and structures and flying in the air. So it's like our whole story of the people you and I are is about resilience, is about taking impossible and saying, I'm possible,
Right.
starting and doing it, no matter what.
No, man. I think that's awesome. This has been a lot of fun too. I think we can recap it now.
Sure.
And so, well, obviously we started with practicing optimistic nihilism, as Samir mentioned. Samir, you want to touch on some other things we went through?
Absolutely, yeah. So we talked a lot about how perspective plays a huge role in our life, and we talked about the different ways of life that we can employ, the different philosophies, such as Stoicism, such as Viktor Frankl's science, and all of these ideas can create a confluence of you, whether it's you, Andrew, whether it's me, or whether it's whomever is on the other side watching this, how you can lead a life well lived and transcend the reality you know today for a better tomorrow.
I love it. This was fun, man. This was a lot of fun.
This is awesome. History in the making.
It is skadoosh. I wanted to put that in there as soon as, and I'm ended after skadoosh, because as soon as you say Kung Fu Panda, I was like, skadoosh is in Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Andrew. So we're back, and we had a little bit of content we didn't discuss during our first episode. So here we are. We're doing a little extension. Got some more stuff for the audience. Let's get right to it.
Let's do it, Samir. Hit me. What's the first thing we're going to talk about?
All right, Andrew. So let's talk a little bit about what success is. What does it mean to really live a life well lived?
Right. No, I think it's a really important question. And I was thinking about this the other day about like what is success and what our society ultimately measures success up to be. And so what I was thinking that we're actually not as far off as I think most people assume we are. I think the problem is that we base our happiness. People say to live a successful life, to be happy, but our happiness is contingent a lot on material things. And so I'm not going to be successful unless I'm happy, and I'm not going to be happy unless I have a new car or something like that. The problem we run into is that's a lot of external factors. And so when I was thinking about it, maybe if we flipped it, right? What if our happiness was contingent on our, oh shit, I just missed it, Samir.
That's okay. You got it.
I'm trying to say basically that success that we have today, like we ultimately believe that to be successful is to be happy, but to be happy in the same vein is to have various, material things like a nice car, a nice house. But the problem with that is that it's constantly the next thing. You're trying to accumulate more and attain more and more. And then it becomes very dissatisfying at a certain point. An extra $10,000 isn't going to mean much to a millionaire, not like it would to a homeless person or something like that. And so what I was trying to say was basically today our happiness is based off of our success. But what if our happiness was our success, right? What if that came first? And our success was contingent on our happiness. And as a byproduct of living a happy life that's not based on material things, we actually lead a more successful life, and whether that's productivity, professionally, and so on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's, the funniest thing about life, about talking about things like success, and all these things are literally byproducts of our lives. Talking about happiness, talking about success. when I was younger, I used to look at all these things and I used to read these articles on this is what Elon Musk does every day to be successful. I'm like, oh, damn, I got to follow everything to the letter. And then in 20 years, I'm going to be able to create something like, Tesla or his other companies.
Right.
And I realized that a bunch of these people who say, these are the steps he takes, or this is like a masterclass on whatever that Elon Musk is doing, or these successful people are doing, they don't have all the insight into what he's doing. Because let's take Elon Musk again, using that example. It's super specific to the person he is, to the ideas he has, to the things that he's been able to execute. And they may not necessarily apply to you or to me or whoever else is on the other side of the screen. So what really interested me through all of these experiences is discovering your own personal why in life, understanding that, yes, it's great to read, the master classes on what Elon Musk is doing or what Jeff Bezos did get like 100 million in a day or whatever it might be. But it's equally as important to understand what makes you the person you are and act on it. Because again, just like you were saying, Andrew, success in our world, we love rewarding people for financial success, for having cars and yachts, and then a lot of men and women partying on those places. But we often overlook being a good person. We often overlook doing good things with those assets and that wealth. And we start seeing money not as fuel, but almost as like the end objective of our life. And, I'm sure this applies to you and to a lot of people listening to us, that we start questioning society's wisdom on, is wealth really success? And I mean, that really all dives down to what is our purpose for being alive. And again, going right back to optimistic nihilism, we don't really have a meaning unless, we're born as the son or daughter of kings or queens or whatever. We don't really have a destiny to follow. So life is meaningless until we give it meaning.
Sure. No, I think that's a really great point, and something that I kind of wanted to echo that you were saying, and this is something that our econ teacher always says, but I think that the issue with people today is that along the way to greatness, they sacrifice goodness. And that's what you were mentioning earlier, right? There's this dissatisfaction over time because you can only, you reach a law of diminishing return with your own success if you're going to base it off material goods or whatever. And so you end up finding that some of the most successful people, when you look at, the stat sheets, right, and what assets they have, are the most unhappy people, and that they're not their success or their happiness was contingent on their success, but in terms of material things, but at a certain point, that $10,000, to go back to my earlier example, means less and less to the millionaire.
Exactly.
So that's just something to think about.
And just like keeping the snowball going down the hill, if we give Bill Gates $10,000, he'll say, "Oh, pocket change, cool." But if we give it to someone who could actually use it to improve their standard of living, it's game changing.
Yeah, it is.
So that also leads me to another point that, let's look and examine the people who are very financially successful. Let's take Elon Musk again. He talks about how he spends 200 hours, again, don't quote me on that, it's a huge number, per week, doing his work on Tesla and SpaceX. And he has videos and interviews discussing how he crashes at 2 a.m. on his couch instead of going home because he's constantly hustling in that grind for working. And when we see these people, we envision the outcome. We see the wealth, we see the big houses and the cars and the easy life, but we don't often pay attention to how they got to that. We don't see the hustling at 2 a.m. or we don't see them skipping meals because they have deadlines to meet. And to them, I'm pretty sure Elon Musk considers himself successful because he achieved certain stuff, financial goals, personal goals in companies and whatnot. But is that success to us? Would someone across the street who wants to be a multi-billionaire consider himself successful after sacrificing family, after sacrificing a bit of his personal or her well-being? And this can go for any job, whether you're a business person, an artist, or like a James Bond type of person. Not all lifestyles are suitable for our personal why. And that goes right down to life well lived. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point. And it goes back to happiness and what it is that you need to be happy. Some of these people need very little in terms of social lives, and you'll see some of the most successful people have really destroyed some relationships along the way to get to where they are, whereas others find that they feel like they're isolated once they get there. And that, to your point again, maybe this wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. Maybe this yacht's actually more lonely than I thought it was.
Exactly.
And there's very superficial. And so that's something that you need to think about. And it goes back to, your why. I think that Elon Musk and other people who are staying up at all hours of the night, putting in 200 hour work weeks, right? Those people are inspired. And so inspiration, I think, is really important. I think that the problem a lot of people face is that instead of being inspired, they're motivated. But the problem with that is it comes and goes, right? And we've all experienced that throughout our life. And so I think that the beauty of finding your why, and although it's challenging, I think I'm still trying to figure that out, is that it is inspiring. And if you can master that and commit to that, I think people will find, regardless of the success, if you will, they have in terms of their profession or their career, whatever they choose to pursue, that they have a genuine level of happiness. And that's a beautiful thing, I think, when you can get to that point.
For sure. And I'm so glad, Andrew, that you mentioned both things on, what it means to be inspired or what it means to be motivated. And I think at a later point, we should reach back to what happiness is. But before we get to that, when it comes to things like inspiration and happiness, whether it was from my time at Hill or whether it was with the podcast, Transcend Reality, anything, there were, like these little bouts of times in my life when I came face front to the hard truth that inspiration in life may not always correlate to real change. It may not always correlate to progress in something. Exactly. Sometimes our inspiration and our motivation doesn't always correlate to us conquering the world or creating a new product or just achieving a day that we could look back on and be proud of. And that was pretty mind-boggling to me, because oftentimes we're kind of sold this myth by a lot of gurus who have good intentions that, just find motivation through my work, through other people's work. And if you just keep up with that motivational cycle, the sky's the limit. And even with that, it'll be like the beginning. And I got hooked on that. I was like, hey, I just got to keep finding motivation in the things that I do. And, you and I, we're going to knock Joe Rogan off #1, and we are going to be, the kings of the podcast group.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always happen,
Yeah.
So all part of going back to leading a life well lived, from my humble perspective, I came to see that creating systems in an organized life was extremely important in achieving success, however way you define it. So, like, why don't we take the goal of getting shredded, of having a good physique that we can be proud of? It takes a lot of work, and whether it's a personal challenge, whether you want to impress other people, regardless of why you're doing it, it takes a lot of work. And oftentimes, there's this one study that in January, gyms see like a 300% increase in memberships on average. It's crazy. And by February, if we start with that 0% up to 300 in January, in February, there may be at like 100, maybe 75% increase.
All those resolutions, man.
Exactly. And you want to know what happens in November?
drops off.
Maybe 5%.
Yeah. No, I'm not
5%.
surprised by that. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, I mean, don't quote me on the specifics, but roughly speaking, those are the figures. And Andrew, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that. I think every year people, they create these resolutions, right? And it usually has to do with their physical, appearance, right? And so
Yeah,
gyms are happy for the first couple months of a new year. But something that I try to do, every year is instead of make a resolution, I make a goal, which isn't far off from, I guess you could say, resolution, but they're all centered around, like, I guess you could say, 4 pillars of my life. So I have
sure.
faith, leadership, scholarship, and service. And every year I
Wow.
write down something under faith, leadership, scholarship, and service. These are all things that mean something to me. And I go beyond just writing it down, because we actually share it with people in our family, right? So
Awesome.
not
Yeah.
only do you know, I think the problem is a lot of people sign up for gyms, and they have no problem posting a little thing like, oh, I'm in the gym or whatever. It's like 3 seconds of their 15-minute workout. But
Yeah.
having people to hold you accountable and being open about that, I think that you'll find that if you're willing to share what you're committing yourself to do, it's a lot harder to drop it, right? Because people have an expectation and they're also holding you accountable in the process, which is really good. That's something that's helped me at least.
Exactly. Yeah. Accountability is such a huge part of really achieving success. Again, I mean, a, a life that people can look back to and remember does have to include some success. And it doesn't have to be financial or being a civic leader or anything. It could just mean helping someone breathe a little easier that day. And again, going right back to your idea of not doing New Year's resolutions, but making goals and then keeping yourself accountable, it all starts with, again, I think going back to that systemizing your life and creating a mindset of friction, that everything in the world has some sort of friction. That, let's go back to the example of having a good physique. It's easy to walk to the closet and grab some cookies or grab some ice cream, but there's a lot of friction between waking up in the morning, getting your gym clothes, and then heading to the gym. So by creating some sort of like a system that, hey, I'm going to wake up at a set time, maybe not even at a set time. Maybe there are days when you take it easy, but you have one action. You open the blinds. Then the second action, you make the bed. And the third action, you just keep getting the ball rolling.
Yeah,
And
no, I love that. I love that you're talking about that. I know I've listened
yeah,
to people, who they're not morning people. So what they do is they'll actually have the cereal out, right, and the bowl and the spoon, right. So really,
exactly.
you're knocking something out the night before that makes that thing that you would dread in the morning, right, easier, right. Well, I know that breakfast is waiting for me downstairs. I know I
Yeah.
had that already set, right. And so to keep going, I just read a book by a guy named Mark Manson, actually. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That's the name of the book.
Yeah.
But he talks about how action actually leads to gaining motivation, which then leads to inspiration. A lot of people say, well, I'm not motivated, right? Do one thing each day, right? And then
Yeah.
it's a snowball effect. And that's something that you're mentioning, right? Just start by opening the blinds. That's your first action of the day. That's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
But you're going to start to see that the next action's a little bit easier because you're building momentum off of that. A lot of people just think, oh, I need to be inspired and motivated to do this. And so if they're not, they never take that first step, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to kind of create guide rails in your life when you know you're struggling with a certain thing, to set yourself up for success ahead of time, right? So that when you get to that moment and you might not be motivated to do it, or you might not be inspired, that you find that it's really not that hard. And then on top of that, you're able to just keep going and you keep rolling.
Exactly. Exactly. That's fantastic. And that, I mean, both of our perspectives really goes to show that willpower is fantastic. It's super important, obviously, but it is, as science proves, a muscle. And after time, you will get tired if you don't have systems like getting blind, opening the blinds, then getting cereal, so on.
Right.
And that leads me to something that's really personal to what I feel is a good factor to my success, to that can be included in anybody's success, which is a mindset of being addicted to results. So I'll explain what that means. So let's say we're at school and we have some project or some work, whatever it might be. And if it's something that I really feel passionate about, of course I'm going to put everything I have into it. And then after that, I see that the process, whether it was with me or a group of people, it pays off,
Yeah.
at least hopefully. And once I see that payoff, I'm like, wow, I can take a step back and I can say, hey, I really like how I felt working towards it, how I felt when I saw that it paid off, and I'm going to do something like that again. And that kind of, again, creates that snowball that it makes the system easier, that even when I have to do something I don't necessarily like, maybe going for a run or doing some exercise, I can say, hey, I want to put in my 100%, because even though I may not like being in the moment doing the process, in an hour, in a day, or in a year, I can look back on that moment. I can say, wow, it felt pretty good knowing that I accomplished that and that I am where I am because I put in that effort to achieve something.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting. And I didn't mean to cut you off there.
that's okay. Yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
I do want to challenge you a little bit with this because I think it's an interesting concept to become kind of addicted with the results, right? Because it's going to, or at least theoretically, it's going to inspire you to continue to putting up with the process, like in terms of football, like football practice sucks. You can talk to most football players, but the feeling of winning a football game is one of the best feelings you ever have. So you're willing to sacrifice kind of the crappy process along the way. But
Sure.
I do want to challenge you in that sometimes you're going to reach a plateau, right? And you mentioned it, and I think it's inevitable at certain moments. And it might not be in all aspects of your life. Some things in life you might be able to just keep rising to the top, right? But at certain points, you will hit a plateau. And I want to challenge you and just to hear your input. And I think that becoming addicted to the feeling result is good, right? Because it drives you to do more. But what happens when you stop hitting that result? Maybe you fail a test and then the next test doesn't go so well, and then the next test, right? So now you're kind of on the skid here, right? And so it's a little bit harder to get through the process. And so I know some people, and I'm guilty of myself, like I am addicted to, I love the feeling of doing well on a test or on a project because it then validates the work I will have put in. But I've also
for sure.
had instances in classes where I've had like a really bad month, I guess you could say, right? Where it's just a string of weeks. I don't ever catch a break in terms of, a test or something like that. And then the process becomes harder. So what are your thoughts on that? Because that can be very real for a lot of people too.
It's absolutely so real. And again, it really depends on the person, on where they are, what they think of themselves and everything around them. But if I were to work with you, both you and me, if we were to work towards funneling some sort of a simple tool that everybody and anybody can use to get themselves out of a rut, I think a good place to start is taking your perspective from just our perspective on a test or on an assignment or some work, and zooming out. I mean, not just zoom out to the point where you see yourself and your job, but I mean, look at the world as a whole, as if you are some sort of being who is examining everything that's going on planet Earth. And this, I mean, I speak from experience here. I'm doing a math test or something, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do great today. And give it a week, I'm like, shoot, what just happened? Where was the gap between me feeling so good and then doing garbage?
Yeah.
So what always helped me was breaking free of the perspective of, oh shoot, can I ever get out of this? And that started from taking a look at a very holistic perspective of everything. That here's you and me. We have a test. We did garbage. Then we're here at the Hill School. There are 500 kids who are individually dealing with their own crises, whether big or small. Then we're here in Pennsylvania. There are millions of people, some employed, some unemployed, some barely scraping by, some doing very well. And then we zoom out even further. Here we are on planet Earth, where we talked about this earlier, who are experiencing abject poverty, where while there are those with extreme wealth who are trying to overcome that. So step one for me was realizing that it's not the end of the world. One test, whether it's the SAT, whether it is maybe an investing assignment that cost me a huge amount of money, or a math test, I came to see that taking my perspective of, oh shoot, this is a big thing, to realizing that there are opportunities ahead of me where I can work harder to prove myself was a good first step. And Andrew, feel free to jump in at any point if you have something. And so, moving forward on the second step, it's first that I acknowledge that there is something that I can break free from. And then the next step is planning, creating organization to how I can rebound. Because again, whether it's a plateau or whether it's a massive shoot down from a test performance or anything in life, an athlete not doing as well as he or she thought that he or she would be, sitting down at some point and taking a moment to evaluate everything, evaluate all the variables of what the inputs are, what we are putting into our craft or our objective, and also seeing what we can do to better ourselves from what we did the last time. Let's go right back to a math test. Let's say I spent 3 hours sitting in front of my notebook, and because of that, I felt like, dang, I spent 3 hours, did pretty good.
Yeah, 3 hours is a long time.
Is a long time, yeah. But then what if I only spent 45 minutes actively engaged because I had my computer in front of me and I went on YouTube every 20 minutes to take a break, get myself back in the flow.
Sure.
And that little break wasn't just like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. That was like 15 minutes, and that adds up. So keeping a very detailed organizational plan of how you approach things is super critical. And also approaching that with a mindset that I'm not going to be busy today. I'm not going to idly sit here, or maybe actively sit here, but watch YouTube, scroll through social media, and then for 5 minutes just study. I'm going to efficiently spend my time on what I need to do so I can improve myself. So I think this whole topic of how we can get out of a rut deserves its own episode between you and me, maybe a guest in the future.
Yeah.
But I think those are a few of the important tools.
Yeah, no, those are good points you made. And again, just going back to that, like, what would you say to somebody, right, who's been in this rut, if you will, for a while, and they break out of it, right? And so they start doing very well again, and they're achieving highly at the rate they wanted. And you said, like, they're addicted to this feeling. What do you have to say for the people? Because I think unless you know your why, which you do mention, and for those people that do know their why, I think results are very gratifying for them, because it's more than just an A or something like that. I mean, we use school a lot because we're students, but professionally might be more than just that, because they know they're serving a higher purpose in doing so. I think
absolutely
back to what we were talking about earlier, a lot of people who are addicted to the results, right? And they're successful. They have a yacht. They have all these nice things, right? They end up finding that, like, there's got to be something more than just the result. And so that's what I wanted to challenge you to think about too. And I think that you do know, right? Because we've talked, and I feel like you are certain of what your why is. And that's awesome. I think a lot of people who don't necessarily know what it is and are high achievers and do achieve highly start to, at some point, even if they're not hitting a plateau in terms of their results, right? They keep breaking through new barriers. They reach a law of diminishing returns in which they're like, is this really satisfying for me anymore? The results I were addicted to don't serve a higher purpose than just that,
For sure.
feeling of, oh wow, I did really well on this. That's a validation for everything I've done. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, not everybody knows their why, and they're
Yeah,
struggling
yeah.
to get through life. But they might be high achievers and they might be doing very, very well for themselves.
I'm really glad that you circled back to that, Andrew. And again, as a disclaimer for you and for anybody who might be listening in on this, at a certain point, when you practice a philosophy or a way of life or multiple, like a huge amalgamation, it it and I'm speaking from experience here, it feels like, you know, everything becomes kind of mixed in because you're applying it daily and you don't go back to reviewing the basics because the basics are kind of being employed every day. And I mean, there's this really famous movie, Inception, with Leonardo DiCaprio, where it's all about ideas, learning about where the genesis of the idea is coming from. And if you have something to say, just
No,
feel free to hop in.
I've seen the movie Inception. I love it, so I'm excited to see where you're going with this.
Awesome, awesome. It's an amazing movie. So exactly with Inception, it's all about placing an idea in somebody's head. Spoiler alerts massively if anybody hasn't seen it. So Inception's all about putting an idea in somebody's head. And the art is not to have that person see, oh, I'm the person who put the idea in your head, but it's to have, like, let's say I'm trying to do Inception on you. And let's say I'm putting an idea in your head. I don't want you to be able to trace the idea back to me, back to the fact that I put it in your head. Instead, I want you to naturally come up with it, feel like you naturally came up with it, so
Sure.
you could live your life having thought you came up with that idea. So, in a way, living life with a bunch of philosophies and taking things from religions and having a peck from different philosophies and different perspectives, at some point creates a big swirl of ideas that at some point I can't do like a reverse inception on myself and say, oh yeah, when I was like 5, that's where the idea came from. I just can't do it. So it's, in a way, it's a difficult process to go back and try to remember what I used to do when I was at a plateau or at a rut, because whenever I encounter one in today's in the modern day, for me, of course I get boggled down. Of course it takes a while for me to get back up, but pretty consistently I'm able to jump back up, and it takes a lot for me to go in my head and send a probe and figure out why I'm able to do that. So that's like my little disclaimer, that it, after a while of employing so much, again, I mean, it's so little, how, because I truly know basically nothing of the world because of how complex it is.
Yeah.
But from what I do know, from what I've had the opportunity to take pecks from different perspectives and different ideas, it's an arduous process, but it's also very gratifying to look back on how I'm able to jump back from ruts. So, with my disclaimer out of the way, I'll get back to your question, Andrew, or your challenge on what it takes to get out of ruts and what it takes for somebody who has jumped out of a rut to consistently push forward, to consistently avoid a plateau and just keep going onwards. So, again, a fair place to start is there will always be plateaus, there will always be these ruts that we jump into, and it's a natural part of life. There's this one quote that I love, and it goes along the lines of this, that you could put in everything that you have and you can still lose. You can still lose, but that is not a failing of yours. That's life. So the way I like to view these obstacles are as improvement obstacles. I don't see failures as exactly that, a failure. I don't see plateaus as just a plateau. but I see it as a way I can transcend my reality. I see it as a way where I can, employ the mindset of, hey, how can I become better because of this obstacle? How can I become better, not just for myself, but for the people around me, to push everyone around me to become successful through this plateau and through this obstacle? And over time, these 1% incremental improvements are just that. They compound a bit. And over time, I can't even do reverse inception and see that, oh yeah, 4 years ago at like 2 p.m., I figured this out. I can't do it.
Sure, yeah,
But
yeah.
I know within me that if anybody approaches improvement obstacles, meaning failures, obstacles, plateaus, with a mindset of curiosity, with a mindset of, hey, what can I use this feeling of, hey, I didn't do anything today, but that's okay. I can use that for tomorrow. How can we use that to become better? And frankly, I think that's the best way so far, from my humble perspective, that anybody can break free of that plateau.
Yeah, I think that's all great stuff, Samir, and I agree with it 100%. I think that I might have poorly worded my question. What I was originally trying to get at is that's great for
That's
somebody with
okay.
a why, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who knows this is what I want to do. So in the face of adversity, I'm going to continue to rise above. And everything you said, I agree with 100%. My
Sure.
question
Sure.
to you is, we're talking about why, right? We're talking about success, our why, and how important that is. That's really what transcending reality is all about. It's about finding that
Yep.
why and then continuing to pursue and live in accordance with it. What do you say to somebody who, by the standards of the world, right, back to our question of what is success, is very
Yep.
successful? They have what most people would think would equate to a happy life, right? And they keep getting these great results, but at a certain point, the results are not gratifying. So
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
a byproduct of them maybe not choosing a profession that's in accordance with their why? Or so what are your thoughts about that? Like how do you help somebody or get somebody to realize, maybe I need to divert, maybe I need to go a different route, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
reassess, you know what, maybe this isn't something that's that meaningful to me. Some people go their whole life without knowing. And it's a very real thing. Whether it's, because they didn't search for it, or they got into something thinking that it was going to be gratifying and to an extent it was, right? They got to
Sure.
live
Sure.
fast life, but after a while it was just like, this is it, so
Yeah.
what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Again, Andrew, I'm so glad that you circled back to like the holes of what I not get to. So when it comes to somebody who achieves a lot of, whether it's material success or any form of success that other people can look at and say, hey, wow, this guy or this gal really has his life figured out. But inside, that person is probably no more than a hollow shell doing these sort of like robotic tasks to keep hitting that sort of success. And maybe it's sustainable, maybe it isn't. And ultimately, what matters most is, again, going back to the why. And it's really an honor for a person to be able to create it, and it's something that not everybody can, which is, I see it as a great failing of our society. And it's also worrying because the people, at least again from my perspective, who understand what they want to do are, or at least the people who go into something, maybe they don't say that, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I have wanted to do since I was 4, but they go in and they do it, and they benefit themselves and they benefit others. It's, damn, lost my train of thought there.
All right, bro. I've done it. It's okay. And I'm saying our happy, or sorry, our happiness is contingent on our success. I'm saying that
Right.
our success should be contingent on our happiness. If I'm a happy person, genuinely, that's living a successful life. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
And
exactly.
we flipped it. And I don't think we're that far off. It's just changing our perspective on the situation, right? And so
Exactly.
that's what the
Exactly.
point I was trying to make.
I'm very happy, Andrew, that we talked about that real quick there. So yeah, exactly. When a person's achieving, whether they're a business person or an artist or an athlete, whatever, if they're achieving but they feel empty inside, I truly believe that what it takes to reinvent yourself isn't much. All it takes is taking a step back from what you're doing, and maybe even if you're the CEO of a big company, but you don't feel the same um, level of satisfaction from your work, take 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes and do something like journaling. Do something like introspective thinking and reflection, because to understand who we are is hugely important. And this goes for the people who don't have their why, who don't understand what they're really doing on this planet, but they still are doing something. And correct me if I'm wrong, is that veering towards what you were talking about, Andrew?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So the best way to reinvent yourself when you don't have that life mission or a personal why, is take 5 minutes a day. And if you don't have 5 minutes to do something like this, that person does not have a life. So journal, go on YouTube and find some videos, something similar to Transcend Reality, to gain new perspectives on what's going on in the world, on different ways of life, on different ideologies. And perhaps some of this will strike a chord with the person you are, because maybe you don't have a why. Maybe you don't have a reason for why you wake up in the morning, but you do have work. You do have these projects that you're doing. And I think it's important to understand who you are. And that starts absolutely with taking 5 minutes to just start, as we've been really talking about. Get a journal, just if you have a computer or a phone, type some notes about how you're feeling, what you can look back on your life and what you feel, and what you also want to envision your life as, and go from there. Just start with that question of why.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest obstacles people run into, especially like younger kids, is just having the courage to pursue a why, or to search for it, right? Because
Yeah,
it doesn't just fall in your lap all the time. And I think that when you see highly successful people, you just imagine that it fell in their lap, right? Or that's something they always knew. But there's also
sure.
people who actually started their a career later on. It was like a second
Yeah,
career or something, right? They were in their 50s, 60s, who had a great deal of success.
yeah,
And they were happy doing it. They were genuinely happy pursuing this new why. But it takes courage, right? And you said it
yep,
doesn't take much to
huge.
reinvent yourself. And I think the key ingredient to reinventing yourself is the courage to do so. And
Yes,
the
yeah,
having the ability to examine yourself and the situation around you, and to take that jump, right? And
yeah,
just
yeah,
and to start by, whether it's listening to something like this, checking out our blog,
yeah,
or
exactly.
going online and looking at stuff, and having a curiosity, as you mentioned,
Yep,
to find it, because it is there. And again, I'm 18 and I'm still looking for it for myself, but
of
I
course.
know that you need to have an open mind to it. And I think
Yeah,
that's important. And the older you get, the harder it is to readjust, especially, I mean, I'm sure when you have kids, it's a lot easier to go just change your profession and stuff like that. We become
yeah,
comfortable, right? Um,
absolutely, absolutely. That's also a really good point, that I did say it's easy to reinvent yourself, but you're absolutely right. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of resilience, because let's say you have kids and you have a family, you have your wife or your spouse, and you're in a job which you thought you really enjoyed when you started, but now that you're a couple of decades in, you're like, shoot, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this.
yeah.
And you go back home and you see that, hey, this job is allowing me to comfortably live with my kids, with my spouse. And what am I going to do if I try to reinvent myself to do something that I actually want to do, but it flops? What are we going to do? Like, have my kids? Can I live with the fact that my kids are going to be on the street without a roof over their head? And you're right, it takes a lot of courage, and it's a difficult process to reinvent yourself, to take that leap of faith. But what I will say about anything is, going back to a point that you and I made earlier, is that money is in our society quite frequently viewed as the be all end all. It's like the end objective of our lives. Whereas I try my best to view money as an asset, as it is, as fuel to achieve something. Because again, let's look at a video game. In video games, we have the character who goes about making money, but that's not the point of the game. That's a boring ass game to just make money. So
Yeah.
you use that money to build an empire or create a business to explore space or just something cool. And I try to approach life in a very similar way. And that's one of the smart things video games does, that they don't view money as the end objective. They view it as the fuel to the end objective in that video game.
I like that. I've never thought about that. That's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that resonates with you a little bit. And that all goes back to the point we're trying to hit, which is, what is our why? Because the father or the mother who has a job but they're not feeling too passionate about it, it takes a lot to reinvent yourself. But switching gears completely here, if we look at a soldier, chances are they enlisted or they went to the school and they joined the military or whatever branch because they wanted to protect the people back home. They wanted to protect that way of life, and so on and so forth. And in a perfect world, if we look at a politician, they are serving the people with their interest in mind because they want to create better lives for the people under their jurisdiction. Again, perfect world. Who knows
world
what that's
there.
real,
Yeah.
but yeah. So chances are most likely with those roles, they know why they're doing that. For the soldier, for the politician, for the person who founded a nonprofit to better the lives of people who don't have food that readily available. They understand what they're doing. But also, again, I'm so glad, Andrew, that you brought this up, that it takes a lot to find your why. It takes a lot of support, a lot of resources to be able to find your why, and then especially build on it. Not just daydream about it, but execute your why.
Yeah, I was glad you said there, to segue into our next point, right? Like, okay, if we're reinventing ourselves or we're searching for a why, or maybe we had it, right? What separates the doers and the daydreamers, right? And I've been thinking a lot about this too. I think that one thing that both have is they both have a vision, right? But while the daydreamer might be motivated, the doer's inspired. And not only does the doer have a vision, they have a mission, right? They have an actual plan of attack. And so they can pursue that courageously, knowing that, hey, these are the steps. And if I fall along the way, I'll get back up because I have a dream and I have a distinct mission and how I'm going to go about achieving that. Whereas the daydreamer, again, we talked about motivation, right? And how that comes and goes. We talked about that earlier this episode. And really diving in. The doer does. I like the doer just gets
exactly.
And it's because they pursue that with a confidence and a passion. And that's something that I think if you can find that at some point in your life, you'll be able to, whatever it is, whatever comes your way, continue confidently. And that's an awesome thing.
Absolutely. For sure, Andrew. And you know what, how about we take a step back from talk about our like life missions and really like take a look through success in general, a life well lived in general. And what would you say, Andrew, is the difference between, truly being a daydreamer and being someone who can realize, make their dream a reality.
Yeah, and I think again, the big distinction is the doer has a mission. They have a plan of attack, and they're inspired, right? It's inspired action. Whereas the daydreamer will go through bouts of motivation, and for a while they might even have the willpower to continue to pursue. But as we said, especially when you're pursuing something that is, when you're trying to tackle anything big in life, it's going to take time, and you're going to become exhausted at various points. And we talked about how willpower, after it's like a muscle. After a while, you're going to get fatigued, and you might find out when you're fatigued that you actually don't mind taking a break from it, and then they never come back to it. Whereas somebody who has a clear vision for what they want to do, and they have I'm going to say it again, a plan of attack, really, to go for that, a mission, and live in accordance with that, that's what's going to separate them.
Definitely. Again, keeping the audience in mind and keeping ourselves in mind, really, to, again, push everybody forward with us to collective benefit. We've discussed what the difference is between being a daydreamer and being someone who also is a daydreamer. Absolutely, that's necessary in life, but then takes it a step further and makes it a reality. So what would you say, Andrew, are some of the ways to transcend daydreaming and become a doer?
Well, I love that question, because it's something that's very relevant, I think, especially in our lives right now.
For sure.
Right? And we've talked about it, but just taking a first step. You're not going to know whether you enjoy something or not until you're actually doing it. And then, as I mentioned earlier from the book I was reading, right? Like, action leads to inspiration, but you need to do something to start, right? And so taking that first step, and then experimenting and continuing to take the next step and the next step and build and build. We talked about it earlier in the episode, right? Opening the blinds. That's how you're going to start your day, right? That's your mission for the day. You're going to start every day by opening the blinds, right? And then you've already prepared breakfast downstairs from the night before, and creating a systematic way of living, which is also something you had touched on earlier, right? And creating systems in your life that are going to enable you to continue on this mission that you have. What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly that. You hit all of the big things that I also so deeply resonate with, that systems are so important. Making sure, I think I'll also add on what you're saying, that having these systems are so important. Having the mindset of just starting, of not worrying what will happen, because that's in the future. We can get there and deal with that. Might as well just start here and now. And another thing that I find so important to differentiate the daydreamers and the people who execute stuff is, when they wake up and when they go to sleep, they have a sort of like a thought in their head that, hey, this is why I'm going to sleep, and this is why I'm going to wake up in the morning feeling energized. Because, again, just as you were saying, action leads to inspiration, and that inspiration is what will keep the cycle going of action and then inspiration, and it keeps going until you have Google, until you have Transcend Reality, until you have everything that has ever mattered in this world. And I think that really all starts with the question of, why am I going to wake up today? And also, what am I most excited about doing today?
I love that you say that. I have a calendar actually on my desk. And what I do is, it's like a planner, right?
Sure.
And what I would say to the people who don't necessarily like to have complete structure of their day, and they like to be kind of loose, try it out. And it doesn't need to be planned out to a T your day, but hit checkpoints throughout your day, right? So that's what I do on my planner every night. I look at what I accomplished today, and sometimes you're not going to always hit everything, but there's certain things on my planner that I star. So for instance, today I was like, hey, Transcend Reality Podcast with my friend Samir, like, that's something that excites me, so I put a star by it, right? And so every day you look for these different things. And also, not gonna lie, I put stuff on my calendar that I'd be doing anyway. If it's like eat breakfast or like work out or something simple, I put that on there too, because it feels good to check things off, right?
Exactly.
continue to push you along. And so that's something that I do every night. And so I plan for the day ahead, and then what I'll do is I'll look back before I cross off the last day. I'll look at, hey, what did I accomplish today? What did I not accomplish, and where am I going wrong? And there's periods in my life, and especially with the pandemic and everything, it can be harder, right? Because you don't feel like doing as much. But to continue to see where you hit the checkpoints, and then what inspired you to do that, right? And so that's something that I've done. I think it's meaningful for me. I know some people like to journal. I know some people like to meditate as yourself. So if you want to touch on that, I would love to hear your input too.
Yeah, I'm again so glad that you segued it in so perfectly. That exactly, in order to make progress, in order to just start, you have to. We all have to have a plan of action so that we can execute. And then once we're in that it's like a jungle, honestly, when we get in a project or work, because we might feel bombarded with everything around us, from smaller objectives to like the big goals that we have to hit. And I really see, like, expanding on this jungle analogy, keeping a planner, keeping calendars, and keeping all of these organizational tools in our back pocket is like the equivalent of like a machete to chop down all the foliage around us, so that we know we can say that, oh, hey, that's the end of the jungle where I have to go. And now I have the tools around me and on me to get there without feeling bombarded by everything around us, through meditation, through, your calendar, through my planner, and all these sorts of things.
Yeah. No, and I think one, to take that a step further, this jungle analogy, right? When you finally get out of the weeds, having something meaningful there waiting for you, right? And that's where goals, I think, come in, right? So we've talked a lot about structuring to achieve something, and then to take that a step further, what is it that we're achieving, right? So I told you earlier, I have 4 goals that I set every year, and then that's not the only goals I set. Obviously, I set goals every day with my planner and stuff like that, but that you can look back and have a sense of satisfaction, right? And you talk about and appreciate the process that it took to get to this point, right? And so whether that's your why and you're living that out, or there's a specific goal or a purpose or something like that. For a lot of high school kids, that's college. That's getting into the college you want to get into, right? And so that's a 4 years. Yeah, that's really longer than a 4-year process. But it's everyday little things that are going to end up adding on top of each other and make the difference. I think if you're going to look at the successful people and the not so successful people, if you want to talk about Elon Musk, I guarantee you Elon Musk cares about the little things every day. And I guarantee you he's structured to his day. He might not have as much structure anymore because he's incredibly successful. And I think that he has more autonomy because it's his own business and it's done very well. But I know that along the way, you mentioned it, right? He definitely had to structure and create some guardrails, right, in his life to make sure that he was going on the right path.
Exactly, yeah. And as a quick side note for the audience to get excited, and for us, I think this definitely deserves its own episode, discussing productivity, discussing what it means to be efficient, really, in life. So something we can keep in mind for the future. And getting right back to your point, Andrew, absolutely, the little things matter so much that, I mean, after all, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to schedule my day or create goals because I feel like a robot, that I'm just carrying out these things. And hey, for some people that's a perfectly fair point. That's how they want to approach life. And I'm sure it's possible that they can achieve success, which again we'll talk a bit more holistically speaking in a bit, through that perspective. Yet I want to challenge that, because if you don't set any sort of end goal, nor do you have any systems, nor do you have the little things that add up to to reach that goal, it would be like a work of a miracle to see that person achieve anything, because of how unorganized their way of life would be. So, you mentioned it so nicely about how Elon Musk has a lot of autonomy, and to tie in everything from our talk on organization and action leading to inspiration and that cycle continuing, I think success definitely is a very difficult thing to define, but it starts with autonomy. It starts with us being able to define what our success is and approach success through the things that we find valuable.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's great. And again, tying in my point there too earlier, right? Like how
Yeah,
many people's lives, their happiness is contingent on their success, whereas people who live to be happy, and based on their happiness, they are successful ultimately in the long run,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, asking yourself, what is it that is truly gratifying to you? And if it's results, more power to you at a certain point, right? It's going to be a lot of the same. Or if it's, and you'll find that at various points in your life, and with various different things. Or if it's, pursuing your why, and just the pursuit of it is what makes you successful because you're continuing to do it. More power to you there too.
definitely, definitely, yeah. And how about we focus on the little things? We talked about that. How about we focus on the little things in life, everything? What would you say are some of the little things that have personally helped you either attain success as you would define it, or at least work towards attaining success as you define it?
Yeah, I think I mentioned my planner that I do every day, right?
Yeah,
And so that's something small that I can do. And I mean, I would say like surround yourself with the right people because that is important. That might be bigger. I don't know. Are we going to consider that to be one of the little things?
by all means,
So, and so
hugely important.
right people who are also passionate. If you surround yourself with people that they don't they're not inspired by anything. Like for instance, Samir, like I enjoy our conversations together. I mean, we've been friends for 4 years, but
Yeah, yeah,
I get a
likewise.
sense of passion from you, in that you care about what you're doing, right? You're genuine about your passion. And I hope you feel the same way about me. Like I love interacting with people and hearing different perspectives. And so that's one
For
thing,
sure.
right? It's not only people. One of the biggest things I think that not a lot of people think about, but is just humility. I think that, and you look at yourself, especially in the pursuit of something, you're not going to be perfect at it at the start. And I mean,
Sure,
nobody's
sure.
perfect, right? So especially like for me in school, when I want to be successful in school, it starts with like, oh, maybe I'm not so good at math, or maybe I'm not so good at physics or something like that. Right? What
Sure,
are
sure.
take to ask for help, right? And admit that. And for some people, it's really hard to ask for help,
Yeah,
especially when it pertains to their success or their careers or whatever, and to seek out that. And one other thing, so I talked about structure. I talked
yeah,
about who you surround yourself with. I talked about humility in terms of asking for help when needed. But the last thing that I think is really important is finding a mentor. And so that's also something that I think that Hill's really nice. I mean, we go to school and we have advisors and stuff like that. But in life,
exactly.
your mentor isn't always going to just be given to you like it is at boarding school. You're going to have to search for one. And so searching for
For sure.
mentors throughout your life, that are going to be able to guide you along the path and know a little bit more
Yeah,
than you do, right? That can then lead you in the right direction, to achieving success. Professionally, I want to be in a situation where there's people ahead of me that are continuing to grow and willing to help me grow in the process.
yeah, yeah,
That's something that
absolutely.
I've done in school as well. So those are, I would say, my four big keys to success: structure, humility, having a mentor, and what was my last one, Samir? I'm blanking, so I'm going to quiz you right now.
Hey, that's all good. So it was structure. You were talking about humility. You were talking about finding a mentor.
Surrounding yourself with the right people. All
There
right.
we go. There we, I think we just kind of merged that in with the mentor thing.
I get surrounding yourself with the right people is important, although I forgot it there. I've tried to apply that to my life as you have too.
Yep.
So those are my four keys for success. I'm going to say it again. So my four keys for success are structure, humility, finding the right mentor, and surrounding yourself with the right people. How about you, Samir?
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I see like the good thing about our interactions is how much of an overlap we have in how we view the world. So yes, by all means, I see, humility. Humility is such a key thing to always know that there's someone better than you, in anything.
Yeah.
And to be willing to have the courage to say, hey, I don't know this, so can you help me so that we can both grow? Because I truly feel that the best way, I'm going to speak very broadly here, our entire species can evolve into a better union of people is through humility, through understanding that, look, I don't know everything. You know, in many areas, a lot more than I do. And just as there are some areas where I know more than you do, but that's okay. And I would want to accept that and draw upon both of our strengths so that we can grow together. And by us growing together, we can kind of like a magnet bring people around us into that sphere of growth, of curiosity for each other. And after enough time, more people can grow and learn from each other. And by that point, enough people have grown to make some difference in the world.
It's a domino effect for sure.
Domino effect, exactly. So I'm so glad, Andrew, you brought up humility because that's huge. And you mentioned a lot of like the small yet also like medium things, which are fantastic. So I'll bring it like even smaller, like the really small things that have also personally laid the foundation to success for me, which is creating good habits. And as a good, actually, I would specify not just habits, because habits can be molded into bad habits or can be broken when you don't even realize that you broke it. So I'll say systems, creating good systems like opening the blinds and then grabbing your breakfast, doing meditation, whatever. I think a couple of the biggest ones are journaling for me, which has been a meteoric change in my life.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Absolutely, yeah.
I was reading a book called Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. It's a really good book. It's like an autobiography type thing. It's not like a self-help book, but it's one of those things where you can get a lot of good insight for yourself. And so this is a very successful acting career. And he journals. And it'll be interesting, Samir, to hear from you like 10 years down the road or something, right? He said that one of the best about journaling is that in his life, when he's been happiest, right? When he's been achieving at a high level and he's just had a genuine satisfaction with his job, he can go back to the moments in his life through his journal. So in a moment, say it's like a couple months or something where he's just dissatisfied and he's kind of out of touch with himself and the people around him, what he'll do is he'll go back a couple years ago in his journal and see what were the things I was doing, during that time that was leading to my satisfaction, to my happiness and stuff like that. So I just wanted to say that I think that's awesome that you journal. And it'll be interesting to be able to, at certain points in your life, look back on, today maybe.
Absolutely.
What was special about today that you can imply in your life. And that can also help in a way of, and without even realizing it, fix some of your systems or your bad habits, right, that we talked about.
Exactly. Yeah. So why don't we just keep talking about journaling and the power of it? And again, for the audience, you can check out transcendreality.net. We have a couple of posts on the power of journaling. So, just as Matthew McConaughey said, journaling is a beautiful tool because we could be at a Hill reunion in 50 years. And of course, we can look back together as relatively young. Yeah, I'm going to say we're young. We're going to be young then, young dudes. And we can say, oh man, remember when we created the Transcend Reality Podcast and remember how we stuck with it for years after and whatever we might have done. We can look back and we can remember all the big triumphs, all the big improvement obstacles, but we likely won't be able to remember the moments that it took, the small moments of FaceTime meetings beforehand, of writing up little scripts or little ideas, or maybe the laughs of how crazy things are coming along.
Yeah, and the bloopers.
And the bloopers, yes, exactly.
Plenty of those.
plenty of those, which we likely won't be able to remember at that point. But with the journal, there's so many benefits from a science perspective, from a personal perspective, and really for like the soul too, as a human being, that we can look back and we can remember all of the enriching moments of our life. That, yeah, we created the Transcend Reality Podcast. 10 years after that, we became billionaires for solving world issues. 15 years after that, we became president of the US.
Co-president. I'm so into the co-president thing. I've acknowledged the fact that I might never be a whole president, but I'm totally on to the co-president thing.
Co-president.
So you and me, the first co-presidents of the United States.
Making America great. I love that.
Yeah.
So exactly, whatever we have in the future, we will remember those huge milestones: co-pres, Transcend Reality, solving issues in the world. But it's difficult to look back and think of, hey, what did I eat for breakfast yesterday?
Yeah.
I have a tough time. What did I have for breakfast 5 years ago? I couldn't even begin to remember that. But maybe I had a good conversation during breakfast with my mom and my dad, or maybe I called up my cousins, or I talked to my grandparents. Maybe I can remember that I called them or talked or whatever, but I maybe won't remember a chuckle over some dumb joke that we had, or a good joke that we had. And these are truly the enriching moments in our life that build up who we are. So that's like one tiny reason why journaling is so powerful.
Yeah, man. Just the documentation, as we've been saying, right?
Exactly.
There's certainly value in that.
Exactly. Yeah. And another huge part of journaling is, you and I, we both just talked about it, that we get to reflect on our systems, on how our day went, on whether we accomplished anything, or whether we were just kind of sitting in front of the computer watching YouTube, and then at the end of the day saying, yeah, I accomplished a lot. But in fact, all we did was watch YouTube. So with journaling, the best thing about it is we're not talking to somebody. We don't have an audience where they have expectations, and we don't have to put on a facade for their expectations.
Yeah, no, so Samir, as I was saying, I'm doing this thing called positive intelligence, which is all about improving your mental fitness and helping you lead a more efficient but also happier life. And so the guy who does it talks a lot about blameless discernment, right? And so that's something that I think is relevant. And you mentioned in terms of journaling, there's nobody else seeing it, right? And how often do we discern our lives blamelessly without judging ourselves? I think we are very harsh on ourselves. And so recognizing, he calls them saboteurs, these different things, like that sabotage us mentally, right? And one of them is the judgment. How often do we blamelessly discern ourselves? And I think, as you've mentioned, the beauty of journaling is that you have the opportunity to do that. There's nobody else reading that, right? That's something that's very
exactly.
And it's true. It's genuine. You're not, I mean, I don't know what you're writing. I don't know if you're like absolutely just crushing yourself in that journal. Or if you are very generous and be like, hey, you know what? I didn't hit all the marks on my my planner today, but hey, this is what went wrong. This is what went right, and blamelessly discerning that. So that's another great thing about journaling that you can do. And I don't think enough people, whether you're journaling or not, reflect on their lives with blameless discernment.
Yeah, exactly. I love how you made it an official term, blameless discernment. I
didn't make it. He did. I can't take credit since this is going out. I can't take credit for that. But after you've read everything on Transcend Reality and watched all our episodes, feel free to read the Positive Intelligence book.
Love it. Exactly. So, hey, yeah, I'm really glad that you at least introduced that term to me and to the audience. And, again, expanding on the whole topic of journaling and all these small things that add up. Again, honestly, it feels like this sort of thing, like habits, tools for life, like journaling, meditation, exercise, they all deserve their own individual episodes because of how powerful they are.
Well, the beauty of this, Samir, is that we're young and we have the time to do that. And I think that we'll definitely go back and fish through. I think that's like the third or fourth time we've said that we're going to dedicate an episode to that.
Yeah, we got some good ideas.
Yeah, we do
have really good ideas.
Yeah.
So you know what? How about we do a quick recap here? I'll finish up my point, and then we can recap the whole episode here.
Let's go
So
for it.
definitely. So journaling, humility, hugely important things. Keeping a open perspective on the world. That there was, I think it was Socrates, huge Greek philosopher, who said that the mark of a truly intelligent person is knowing that he knows nothing.
Yeah.
Because we think we know a lot. I mean, we can work a computer pretty good. We can stare at walls and look at social media pretty good, or do all, create a business, whatever it might be.
Sure.
But if we look back, we know science, we can understand a lot of complex stuff. But if I were to be asked, or if you were to be asked how a zipper works, I don't know how a zipper works. I mean, it seems so simple, but that sort of a thing stuck with me, that I could not explain to anybody how a zipper works. And keeping that open mindset of yes, I know a fair deal of what I have been learning, what I've been exposing myself to the new perspectives, yet I still have so much more in front of me to still explore. So that's a huge thing. And again, like all these small things that add up, which I'm sure you also really value, are eating healthy, not just, eating junk food or eating what you want to eat, but
There's time for that too, but not all the time.
exactly. Creating a good harmony between the two.
Balance.
Exercise, exactly. Exercise, making sure that you're prioritizing your health. All of these sort of things are huge. So if there's a way that we can present this to you, the audience, in a nice bow, is, look, small things are what create the big things in life. They are what create the goals, which are the successful businesses, the governments of our world, the space programs, whatever, you name it. So long as, Andrew, you and me, so long as the audience members, so long as we can keep waking up knowing that there's some purpose that we can refine at some point in the future, so long as we can just start, and we can surround ourselves with people who are willing to support us because they value the people we are, not because they value the people we can become, whether it's rich or influential. I think success is absolutely within an arm's reach.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's just realizing that it's very real and it is possible, but also holding yourself accountable and applying the steps that we've talked about throughout this podcast. That it is possible, and that's the beauty of it. But it takes courage and it takes resilience and grit. So no,
so much.
I'm right on with that.
Yeah. I think we covered a lot of good stuff here.
We did.
All right, man. We got some awesome content today. We talked a lot about what success is. We talked a lot about what it means to be a daydreamer versus a doer. Andrew, you can take it ahead with other stuff we got.
We talked about systems and building in structure into your life that's going to allow you to become a doer instead of just a daydreamer. We talked about your why and how important that is, and also the path that you can take in terms of discovering it if you haven't already found it.
Exactly. We talked a lot about the small things that add up to make the big things, and try to throw in our humble perspectives on what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, but also what we've learned from these improvement obstacles, so that you guys, whoever you may be, can benefit from this.
I love it. This was fun, Samir.
This has been fantastic, Andrew. And this has been Transcend Reality.
Yeah, skadoosh.
You know what? Let's do it. Skadoosh.
Yeah.
That's like our little outro thing.
Yeah, man.
Awesome. Yeah, this was a fantastic first episode of Transcend Reality Podcast.